Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable, and relax. My name is Peter Tillman and I'm terrified. I'm a physicist here in Toronto and teach at one of the best universities in Canada. I've had a very successful career and have been offered tenure, which I'm still debating. I was very lucky to be born into a very wealthy family and met the man of my dreams about 8 years ago in my early 20s. We've been married for approximately 5 years, and he's my everything. He makes me laugh, he makes me smile, he sometimes makes me cry. Who doesn't have that story to tell about their partner? And he's my partner in crime. The man that came home to me yesterday is not my husband, and I have no idea what's going on. Christopher, my husband, left for a business trip 5 days ago. He's a patent lawyer and occasionally has to travel for work. He left Pearson International Airport and called me when he landed at Weinflughafen, Vienna's main airport. I have a bit of separation anxiety when it comes to being away from him, and he has no problem catering to this. He called me after he got through customs and when he got to the hotel. Nothing long, just a "hey honey, I'm here" kind of call. We always preferred phone calls since we text with everyone else and decided that calling would be our thing. I went about the last 4 days as I usually would, doing chores, teaching the couple summer courses that I've been unfortunately assigned, and picking out new colors for the kitchen. His mom is footing the bill for the renovations, so why not? It's her anniversary present to us. Yesterday, Christopher was scheduled to fly back to Toronto. He called me from Vienna after he got into the lounge at the airport and told me that he was super tired and was going to pass out on the plane. I was happy that he was finally going to get some rest after what sounded like an atrociously busy trip. Poor guy, he works so hard. His flight was scheduled to arrive at 11 p.m., and I had an early class to teach today, so I decided to make dinner and leave it in the fridge for him, and then curl up with the poorly written physics textbook that I was editing for a friend. I realized that 11 p.m. had come and gone and I didn't get word from Christopher, but I just assumed that his flight was delayed. He had a layover in London at Heathrow Airport, and I know that they have some pretty brilliant thunderstorms this time of year. So I just figured that his flight was delayed. When 12 p.m. rolled around, I started to get a bit more worried, but then all of my feelings were allayed. I got a text. I know that Christopher was tired and that he usually doesn't sleep well on flights, so I assumed that he just wanted to reassure me. That's why he texted instead of calling. He said, "Just landed. We'll be home soon." Poor guy was so tired he couldn't even type straight. I even got him a new iPhone for his birthday and assumed that he was still having trouble adapting to the touchscreen, having been a loyal BlackBerry fan for so many years. I went to the bathroom, took out my contacts, and fell asleep. I don't know how long after receiving that text I fell asleep, but I was out cold. A few hours later, I heard the latch turn, and I heard Chris's usually heavy footsteps climb up the stairs. He went to the bathroom and did his usual routine, except he left the water running. I thought that was a bit strange. He's usually very particular about turning off the taps so as to not waste water. Not because of the bills, but because of the whole environmentalism kick that he'd been on for the past couple of years. I was drifting in and out of sleep, but I wanted to see him before I fully passed out. He came into the room and something seemed different. Nothing that scared me, but just seemed off. I have terrible vision, and my glasses were not near the bed since I normally wore contacts. I looked over and his upper lip looked swollen, like if he had been stung by a bee, and I could see a lot more gum and teeth than normal, and had a very broad smile, like he missed me and was glad to see me. I asked him, "Babe, are you okay? What's up with your lip?" He quickly told me not to worry, and it was just chapped from being on the plane. I agreed and, still half asleep, drifted off again. About 2 hours later, I rolled over and noticed that Chris's back was towards me. Whatever. Nothing strange. That's when I put my arm around him. He felt thicker. That's the only way to describe it. I know what my man feels like, and he just felt like a thicker, broader version of him. My general level of unease was starting to get stronger at this point, but still not being fully awake. I just chalked it up to nothing. This morning I woke up and Christopher was gone. His suitcase was still there. He had changed his clothes, but he was gone. I called him, no answer. He, however, quickly texted me back the following: "At the gym, loft early, we'll be home after we leave. Good, I thought. Maybe he could work off some of that extra weight I felt on him last night, and chuckled to myself. I went about my regular routine, and was just about to step out the door when I saw his suitcase again. He had left it on the landing by the door, and I guess he just wanted it there so he could sort it in the living room. As I was leaving, a faint musty smell hit me. It was like if someone had left steak out in the sun for a couple hours. I was already halfway out the door, so I felt like it was coming from outside. But when I turned my face towards his suitcase, it got so much worse. The smell wasn't a steak being left out for a couple hours, but a couple days. It reeked. I picked up the suitcase only to realize that he had left his lock on it and I didn't have the keys, so I moved it into the garage just so it was out of the house. As I was about to get into the car, I got another text from Christopher. "I love you, see you soon." I texted back, "When you get home, check your suitcase. It stinks and the handle has some kind of residue on it." I still found it strange that he would text. About 10 minutes after I got into the car, my phone rang. Chris was calling me. Me, hello? Chris, hey babe, so sorry that I didn't get a chance to call you. You must be crazy worried. Me, why? Are you okay? Chris, yeah. I've been stuck here in London just getting onto my plane to come home. Can you come meet me at the airport? I froze. I nearly dropped the phone and almost ran my car off the road. Me. What? What do you mean you're still in London? Is this a joke? That's not funny, Christopher. You came home last night. I saw you. I spoke to you. Yes, I'm a heavy sleeper, but don't shit around. What's going on? Chris. Listen. He put his phone on speaker and I could hear a woman in a thick English accent announcing, "And gentlemen, this is the final boarding call for flight BA 203 to Toronto. Could Mr. Fitzpatrick and Mr. Coleridge please come to the British Airways desk on the main concourse?" I stopped the car. I was dead silent. What's going on? Who did I sleep next to? Me. Christopher, get home. I'm scared. I need to see you. Call me when you're at the airport. Everything is okay. I just need to see you. Chris. Chuckle. Okay, babe. Calm down. I'll be home soon. I should be there by 9 p.m. He chuckled because he figured my anxiety was getting the better of me. I didn't want to freak him out about what happened last night, and the texts and who I had spoken to earlier on the phone. I'm going to work now. I'm not going back to that house. I'm going to the airport as soon as I can to meet Christopher, if it really is Christopher. I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm a physicist, a man of science, and none of this makes sense to me. I haven't been genuinely scared like this since I was a child. What's going on? The good news. Science seems to be a useful tool in all of this. The bad news, it's raising more questions that it's answering. I know a lot of you have referenced the mold stories which deal with demonic possession, but after what's happened today, I think we're dealing with something very different. Christopher called me when he landed, and I rushed to the airport. By the time that I got there, he had already cleared customs and was waiting for me. He had his bag. I have never been happier and more confused to see that beat-up suitcase of his, which I've tried countless times to replace. When I saw him, I knew it was him. No fat lip, no odor, no unexplained weight gain. I ran to him and threw my arms around him. God, I missed him. I was still weary, but the part of me that promised to love and to honor was overpowering the part of me that was absolutely terrified about what happened last night. I rushed him to the car and threw his suitcase in the trunk. It didn't stink and it didn't have any residue on it, and I just wanted to get back on the road to explain to him what was happening. As we rushed down the highway, he asked me what was wrong, what could possibly have upset me to the point that I was acting like a total bag of nerves. I explained everything from the smell, to the other Christopher, to my posting on Reddit, to giving the samples at the lab. He was completely silent, didn't say a word the entire time. Then he turned to me and asked if I had taken acid or if I had smoked meth. I had some substance abuse problems when I was younger, and Chris met me at the tail end of it all. I could see that he didn't believe a word that I was saying. I begged and pleaded with him to believe me, but he just remained silent and stared dead ahead. I could see that he was getting angrier by the moment, thinking that I was making up the entire thing. God damn it, Peter, I'm tired, I'm jet-lagged, and I've been stuck in an airport for almost a day. I don't need this shit as soon as I get back. Can we just go home? I'll take a shower and we'll go to bed and everything will be okay. Absolutely not. No way in hell was I going back to the house. Or should I? I started questioning my own sanity. Maybe I did make the whole thing up. Nothing about the situation made sense, and I hadn't experienced any side effects from the exposure to whatever was on the suitcase handle. The suitcase. I moved the suitcase into the garage. I had forgotten about it after being shattered by the way that Christopher was reacting to the situation. If we went to the house, I could show him the suitcase and he would believe me. I calmly turned to him. Okay, remember I told you about the suitcase? If we go back home and your suitcase is there, will you believe me? I think it was mostly just lack of sleep and exhaustion, coupled with a desire to just get home that made him agree that if the suitcase was there, he would believe me. I gunned it down that highway. 145 kilometers at one point, I didn't care. I just wanted to show him and get the hell out of there. I pulled into the drive and hit the garage door button on my visor, feeling 100% convinced that I was about to be vindicated. The garage door opened up and nothing. Absolutely nothing. The suitcase wasn't there. I ran out of the car and tore the garage apart. Maybe it had rolled somewhere. Maybe I had forgotten where I put it. I searched for a good 5 minutes and then just turned blank face to him. Christopher was pissed. I hadn't seen him this angry in a while. Peter, this isn't funny anymore. I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I just want to go to sleep, get in the house and just drop it. I love you, and I'm going to take your word for it that you're clean, but don't press me. I just stood there staring at him as he walked in the house. I didn't know what to do. Chris immediately made for the shower. We didn't even take his real suitcase out of the car. We just went into the house and I sat in the living room. Nothing felt weird or out of place, and the only smell was the faint vanilla scent from the air wick in the wall. It was about 7 p.m. by this point. Chris got out of the shower and came downstairs wearing his towel. Hearing his footsteps down the stairs terrified me. I froze on the couch and was just relieved to see that he had his normal physique. "Are you coming to bed?" he asked, the tone in his, a voice much nicer and much more sweet than before. It's amazing how much good a shower can do for a man. I saw this as my opportunity to convince him to leave the house. I pleaded with him one more time, and I could just see a look of resigned exhaustion on his face. "Okay, babe, we'll go to a hotel. It'll clear your mind, and maybe you'll stop being such a drama queen." "I love you" was the only thing that I blurted out before I broke down crying. I think the relief of finally convincing him to leave was vindication of the insanity that I was descending into. He pulled on some clothes and I packed a bag. He didn't need anything because he still had clean clothes in his suitcase that was still in the trunk of the car. We got into the car and he gave me a kiss. "Man, you're high maintenance sometimes. One bad dream and you lose your shit. You're a logical person. I've never met a more staunch atheist. And you're acting like a damn ghost slept with you. Let's go to the King Edward." It was my favorite hotel in the city, but because it was only 10 minutes away, we only went there for parties and lunch and rarely got the chance to spend the night. The rooms are amazing. As we drove, I started to calm down. Having Christopher back and being away from the house made me feel better. The phone. In the panic to get home and tell him everything, I forgot to show him the weird text that I had received. I quickly took out my cell and scrolled through the texts. Nothing. No texts from him, nothing. I didn't want to tell him anything because he would just continue to think that I was losing it, and I didn't want to look like a bigger fool than I had already been. I know I had sent and received those texts from him, I know I did. But frankly, I just wanted to get to the hotel and unwind. Maybe I could make sense of this tomorrow. The King Edward has a beautiful foyer dominated by an enormous oil portrait of King Edward VII. As we made our way towards the check-in desk, the clerk smiled at us and said, "Mr. Tillman, how was your evening? And I presume this is Dr. Tillman." She was looking at me. Christopher and I just stood there in silence. How did she know our names? We made no reservations, and we surely didn't come there enough for her to know us by name. I'm fine, I'm sorry, have we met?" Christopher looked at her quizzically, then turned to me. "Oh, well, of course, sir, you just stepped out and told me that you were going to get your husband." Her smile had turned to a look of confusion. Christopher just stared at me. He nor I knew what to say. "I'm sorry, gentlemen, is everything okay?" The poor woman had no idea what was going on, and frankly, neither did I. Chris just stood there. I could see his face change. I could see that he was starting to believe me. I could see his opinion of my night was changing. I spoke first. "Oh yes, we're fine, but we lost our room key. Can you please give us another one? He's so clumsy sometimes." I knew this was my chance to get to the bottom of this, and frankly, we were in a hotel known for VIP guests and great security, so there was no way we were going to be attacked. I felt safe, but asked if the attendant would come with us up to the room. "Of course, sir. Not a problem. Would you be able to provide some photo ID just to verify your identify?" I do recognize you, however I just have to ask, it's hotel policy. Of course, I said, and turned to Christopher. He was just staring straight ahead, still not understanding fully what was going on. I grabbed his hand, it was cold and clammy. Honey, I need your driver's license. Oh, sure, yeah, okay, here you go. He awkwardly fished his wallet out of his back pocket and took out his license. After a couple of minutes, a new key was generated and the lady handed Christopher his license. He still hadn't said a word and just kept his grip on the handle of his suitcase. I know he was trying to not panic and just go with it, but the full impact of my panic had been dumped on his jet-lagged mind, and I could see he wasn't handling it well. The three of us got into the elevator and the check-in clerk hit the 9th floor button. Everything seemed normal, and the beauty and cleanliness of the hotel made nothing seem out of place. Christopher just kept staring at me. His eyes betrayed his worry, but I made the just go with it face. We left the elevator and approached a room in the middle of the hallway. The clerk put the keycard in and the light on the lock turned a fluorescent green. She opened the door and almost fell backward. The smell was unbearable. It stank. It reeked. It pulsated with the stench of rotten meat. Both Christopher and I made retching noises and backed into the hallway. Oh my God, what is that? The clerk looked at Christopher with a sense of horror, looking like she wanted to hit him for what she presumed he had done in or to the room. With hand over her mouth, she yelled in a muffled tone, "Sir, what is that smell?" I knew the smell. I knew it all too well. I just stood there, taking it all in, feeling the full burning feeling at the back of my throat. I have no idea, that's definitely not from me. Christopher shot back at her. He was a good 10 feet behind me at this point, the smell being too unbearable for him. The clerk entered the room and looked around. I followed right behind her. It was spotless. The bed hadn't been touched, the towels were still folded neatly, and the minibar hadn't been disturbed. The smell began to waft into the hall, and the attendant ushered me out, left the room, and closed the door. Chris and the attendant just stood there gasping, trying to regain their breath. And I remained stock still, remembering the night before. We made our way back to the lobby, the hotel clerk looking pissed as hell, Chris standing there in a mixture of nausea and shock, and myself just terrified that I would run into whoever the other Christopher was. I knew I was right, and from the look on his face, Christopher believed me. The elevator opened, and I looked at the attendant. "We're sorry for the smell, sir. I realize that there's nothing you could have done to cause it. It's probably the toilet backed up or something. We'll find you another room. The hotel isn't too busy tonight." "Okay," I replied. "Thank you. We'll go for a walk. We just need to clear our minds." I held Christopher's hand for dear life and guided him to the lobby seating area. "I'm so sorry, babe. I love you so much. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." He was just so apologetic. "I need a drink," he continued. "But fucking hell, I need to change my clothes. That smell is just burned into them." I sat in the lobby while Christopher made his way to the men's room, suitcase in tow. I had line of sight of the room and felt safe, surrounded by the hotel staff and various other attendants. Less than 2 minutes passed and Christopher came running out of the bathroom, white as a sheet. "We need to go, and we need to go now." He dragged me by the hand into the street. "Babe, calm down. What's wrong?" I asked as he dragged me towards our car. There was 2 of everything, 2 toothbrushes, 2 shirts, 2 sets of pants, 2 of every one of my 2 of everything. He continued to drag me towards the car. I just went with it. It had been one hell of a night, and I wasn't going to object to anything. We sat in the car, Christopher panting. "What do you mean there was 2 of everything?" I asked. I opened my suitcase and all of my clothes, my shoes, my everything. There was 2 sets of them. It was only then that I realized what he was talking about, and that he had left his suitcase in the men's room. Someone's been in the suitcase and well, replicated every fucking thing I own. I don't know what's going on, but this shit isn't right. We're going to Anthony's. He hit the gas hard. I felt myself pressed into the seat of the car as it accelerated out of the parking lot and merged onto the highway. Anthony lived about 20 minutes away, regular driving. We were going to make it in 10. Anthony was a physician, a neurologist, and really, knowing that we were not going home and would have medical care if needed, just made me feel better. Christopher looked like he was going to cry, mixed with the anger of a man who had been wronged. His privacy had been invaded. Someone was pretending to be him, and he had no idea what was going on. I put my hand on his thigh and squeezed, trying to reassure him. In the 8 years that I had known him, I had never seen him like this. I called Anthony. Me. Anthony, it's Peter. We're coming over. Christopher and I need to spend the night. I'll explain when I get there. Anthony. Okay, are you all right? Do either of you need anything? Me. No, just make sure that there's parking in the driveway. Anthony. Sure thing. See you soon. Tell Chris thanks again for the gift. I assumed Christopher had sent Anthony a gift from Vienna. He usually sent things back for him whenever he traveled. He's been the big brother that Anthony needed many times throughout his life. We pulled into the drive. Christopher bolted out of the car and banged on Anthony's door. Anthony opened the door and Christopher burst in. Get in, Peter, and lock the door. Anthony put on the alarm system. Anthony complied and asked what the hell was going on. Christopher started. Chris. We've had a fucking crazy night, Tony. We need to stay here. Something really strange is going on. I don't feel safe. Anthony. Why? What could have happened in the past hour to make you this way? Chris. The past hour. Anthony. Yeah, you looked a little out of it when you dropped the bag off, but I figured it was the jet lag. At least the lip looks a little less swollen. Good to see the Benadryl I gave you is working. And damn, glad to see you showered. You stank. Mind you, no one smells good after a day of travel. Christopher nearly fainted. He just fell back into the chair that was behind him. Me. Anthony, did you let Christopher in when he came here an hour ago? Anthony. Of course, he gave me the gift bag and I told him to come in so I could take a look at his lip. He said he was just having a reaction to some pineapple in the salad from the plane. A pineapple allergy runs in Christopher's family and Anthony is aware of this. So I just gave him some Benadryl and told him to drink lots of water. Me. Did he look different otherwise? Was he fatter? Anthony, what? What do you mean? Did he look any fatter than he is now? Number me. What was he driving? Anthony, your BMW, your car. Me. You mean that car that we have parked in your driveway right now? Anthony. Yes, he said he was going to get you and then go to dinner at the King Edward. Christopher Jospit Tillman, what the hell is going on? You two are freaking me out. Me. Anthony. I picked up Christopher from the airport. I've been with him and with our car all afternoon. That thing that came to the house wasn't Christopher. Anthony looked at us skeptically, but his medical mind made him realize that there was no way Christopher's lip would look so normal within an hour. I started telling him the story, all the while keeping an eye on Christopher, who had gone from pale white to a strange greenish hue. I could only imagine what was going through his mind. Just then my phone rang. It was Vas, short for Vasily, the chemist that did my palm scraping from earlier on in the day. Me. Hey Vas, what's up? It's about 8:30 p.m. at this point. Vas, are you on campus tomorrow? I need to see you. We have some results back and they're unusual. Nothing that could hurt you, so don't panic about that, but just not normal. Me. Vas, tell me what's going on. What did you find? I can't handle any more suspense after today. Vas was a very gruff, very bearish Russian man whom I had known for quite a few years. I had never heard him sound confused or worried. Tonight his voice shook with both of those emotions. It almost sounded like he was under duress. Vas. Peter, you're my friend. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the residue from under your fingernails was human tissue. It was necrotizing, rotting human tissue. What's your blood type? Me. O negative, Vas. This is a B positive. I think you need to answer some questions for me, Peter. Me. I'm what? Okay, I'll come into the lab in the morning. Thanks, Vas. No problem. It's a good thing you don't have that suitcase anymore. Good night. As I hung up the phone, I realized I never told Vas that I no longer had the suitcase. I turned to Christopher. He had the gift bag that he had given to Anthony an hour earlier in his hand. It was filled with cheesy Austrian souvenirs and nothing really of note, except for a card in an envelope. Chris opened the envelope and scanned the card. What the fuck? Chris yelled and handed me the card. It wasn't handwritten, it was typed 608. Arrive at airport 6:44. They get home 7:33. Hotel 7:41. Go to room 7:58. Leave quick. Go to car 8:15. Anthony 8:33. Phone ring. Chemist 11:45. Me. It's 10:45 as I type this on my iPad. Anthony, myself, and Chris are sitting in a Tim Hortons coffee shop across the road from 52 Division, a police precinct. Waiting. 10:45 p.m. Tuesday, July 28, 2014. Christopher, Anthony, and myself were all crammed into a booth inside the coffee shop. Confusion, anger, fear, hatred, every single visceral emotion that pulsates in a situation of unknowing flew between the three of us. Virtually no words were exchanged. I think we all sat there, contemplating our own mortality. If this person knew our every move and exactly where we were going to be, how could we do anything about it? What force did we have to fight it? I held tightly onto Christopher's hand. His normally warm, loving hands were cold and clammy with fear. We were across the road from the police station, but how would we explain ourselves? We had brought the note, but what would the introduction be? "Oh, hello, officer. My husband and all of his possessions, including a full-size sedan, were replicated and used to terrify his cousin, a high-ranking neurologist specializing in pediatrics at Sick Kids Hospital." I couldn't imagine the reaction. I could only imagine that we were going to either be laughed at or jeopardize Anthony's career if we said anything. The brain doctor is seeing shit and thinks that his cousin is a doppelganger that I may or may not have slept next to, while my real husband was in Vienna. No, seriously, believe us. Oh, I teach physics too. Fuck, this truly was a catch-22, no way to help ourselves. I couldn't even begin to think of how we would start. Anthony isn't one for silences. He's a very talkative man, and I could feel the tension was getting to him. Saw open a cranium, play around in there and stitch it back up? Sure, no problem. Waiting for a seemingly paranormal creature in a coffee shop in the middle of the largest Canadian metropolis? Hell no. "I'm going to order. Do you guys want anything?" Anthony asked as he rose from the table. "Sit the hell down. You aren't going anywhere." Christopher was starting to get angry. He was a lawyer, and his legally trained bulldog mind was beginning to get the better of him. I could see that he was beginning to reach his limit with what was going on. "Chris, you can see me. The counter is what? 2 feet away? We can't just sit here. We have to order. Plus, I'm parched. It's about 30 degrees, 85 F out there. You two just keep looking at me, and I'll keep looking at you. Cool?" "I'll take an iced cappuccino for the non-Canadians," Chris acquiesced. "I'll just have a coffee," I weakly said. I realized that neither Chris nor I had eaten since this started, and we had to force ourselves to eat something. And a bagel toasted with butter. Anthony made his way to the counter about 4 steps away, and just to keep everyone's mind at peace and focus on the task at hand, we continued the conversation. "Christopher, so we all agree that he knows we're here, right?" "Peter, absolutely, he knew we were here before we knew we were coming here." "Anthony, we're in public, the cops are across the road, this is the best place to be. If he's going to try anything, all these people would notice and say something. The place is well lit, and once again cops across the road." He was right. There was little chance one of us would be stabbed or murdered in the middle of a restaurant, but all of us were convinced that Chris would show up especially after the experience at the Kind Edward Hotel. He came there, he waited, and then he left. He was going to get his husband, me, according to the check-in clerk. Chris looked around Anthony, vigilant as ever. "My man. You know, he's right, this place is pretty busy, especially for a Wednesday night." I took my eyes off Anthony as well, looked behind us even though the door was in the opposite direction, and I swore I wouldn't take my eyes off of it. They were both right. There were a lot of kids, and what looked like an inconsiderate, neglectful woman tending to them all. About 4 kids, 1 parent. Typical for that part of downtown. It was a rich city, but like everywhere, there was poverty. Anthony approached the counter and placed the order. The attendant, unusually happy for 11 p.m., 45 minutes, filled the order, and as she passed the tray to Anthony, looked at him and said, "Don't forget to roll up the rim to win." "Thanks," said Anthony, and made the 4 steps back to our booth. Sidebar: for those of you who aren't Canadian, Roll Up the Rim to Win is pretty much a national event. The loyalty Americans pay to Starbucks is reciprocated in Canada with our loyalty to Tim Hortons. It's a national institution. Twice a year they hold a contest where you literally roll up the rim of your coffee cup and see if you've won a prize. Quite like checking under a pop bottle cap to see if you've won a prize. We sat there and drank our drinks in virtual silence, just watching the clock. About 10 minutes past 11 p.m., and I couldn't handle the noise of the damn kids anymore. I looked at Anthony and Chris. "I need a cigarette. Can we all go outside? We'll stay by the door, and if anything, it's a straight shot across the parking lot to the cop station. We can make it." They looked at each other and agreed. The noise from the kids was getting too much, and they could just use the break instead of sitting there, waiting for our visitor to arrive. We all stood up almost in a choreographed manner, no one wanting to be left behind in the cafe, and made our way to the door. We stood right by the entrance with our car parked in front of us. It had cooled down a fair amount, and there was definitely a bit of a nip in the air. Hell, this is Canada. Nothing surprising there. "Christopher, open the car. I'm going to grab my sweater from the back seat." He hit the auto opener on his keys and the locks flew open. I approached the vehicle, clearly looking inside to see if anyone was crouched in the back seat, just waiting for me. Nothing. I opened the door, constantly looking back at Anthony and Christopher, who were less than a foot away from me at this point, grabbed the sweater, and we all walked back to the entrance. I had finished the cigarette in record time and just wanted to get back in the restaurant. Even though we could run to the police station if need be, the silence of the parking lot, coupled with the exposure of being outside, just gave me an eerie feeling. Anthony and Christopher agreed with me, and we all went back inside. 11:30 p.m. Damn, the kids were annoying. Christopher and I were just in the initial phases of adoption and loved children dearly, but these kids wouldn't shut up. Coupled with the tension of what we were waiting for, it started to get too much. Christopher squeezed my hand. "I'm just gonna tell them to shut up. Fuck, I can't handle this." "Calm down, focus on the task at hand. Let that be white noise." Anthony, our ever-patient physician, had a very calming effect on Christopher, and this seemed to work. Every second that passed, every minute that dragged by, we could feel the tension building. Would he come through the door? Would he manifest right in front of us? How would he do it? And the ultimate question, what the hell did Chris want with us? What was he trying to extract from us that we could possibly give him? Was it money? Say so, and I'll write the check for you right there. Was it control? Was it power? Was it sexual favors? If it was that, I'd volunteer to do him right then and there if that meant we'd be left alone. Not a one of us said a word for the next 15 minutes. We sat there in utter silence, the overpowering din of the coffee shop providing what turned out to be rather useful background noise. In hindsight, if the Tim Hortons had been dead silent, we would have had a much harder time being there. 11:45. We all looked at one another. Nothing. Nothing changed, nothing happened. The din and the noise still continued. People kept placing orders. The overly happy employee kept filling the orders, and just nothing. Christopher kept playing with the car keys, but still nothing. Anthony finished his coffee and rolled the rim. He froze. Where it should have said, "Please try again," or "You want a donut," it just said 1 and 1 is 2. Why 3? Anthony just said, "Oh shit," and showed us the rim. The creature knew we were here. He knew how to communicate with us, but he wasn't here. What the hell was he trying to say? Christopher, Anthony, and I looked at one another. Maybe he wasn't going to show up in such a crowded place, and chose to send us a message this way. Maybe we had outsmarted him by picking such a public place. We had screwed up his timeline. Here we were waiting. "Hey mister, what happened to your lip?" Those 7 words were like a gong, like the so-called shot heard around the world. Fuck, they were a cannon in the noisy room to us. Chris and I turned around, and Anthony, already facing that direction, looked over our shoulders. There was a man sitting in the booth behind ours, his back to us. He was wearing a hat and a jacket with the collar popped. There, standing, looking at him, was a girl, no more than 6 years old, staring at his face. "Mister, why's your lip so fat? That's gross as... I've never moved that fast in my life." "Jesus fucking Christ, run," was the only thing that Anthony could think to say. Christopher and I shot out of the coffee shop as quickly as we could. Christopher hit the clicker for the car door, and the safety of the beep beep that automatic locks make when they open sounded. We all piled into the car. Christopher in the driver's seat, me in the passenger, and Anthony in the back. We hit the start button, and the engine came alive with a soft purr. Christopher threw the car into reverse, and we gunned it out of the parking lot and straight in the parking lot of the cop station. All 3 of us were yelling. Nothing was discernible. Christopher was yelling about how the hell did we miss him coming into the cafe. That seat was definitely empty when we sat down. Anthony was almost on the verge of hyperventilating and kept asking what the fuck we think he wanted. And I just sat there practically screaming gibberish. We had come to an abrupt stop in front of the door of the police station, frozen inside the car. Yes, we know. We should have run inside, but none of us could move. It still boggles my mind that Christopher was able to get the damn car across the road without hitting anyone. Dundas Street is incredibly busy, but still, none of us could move. We just sat there. Anthony broke the silence. "Anthony, stay in the car, don't go inside. We never saw his face, we don't know what we're going in there to report. We can't just walk in and say, 'A man with a fat lip caused a small girl to be grossed out, so we ran out of there.' What the fuck do you think the cops are going to think?" They're going to think we're fucking drugged out of our minds. Me. Are you fucking kidding me? The hell with this shit, I'm going inside. I'm done, I can't, Christopher. Stop, he's right, we don't know if that was him. Maybe it was some druggie with fucked up meth teeth, we don't know anything yet. Sure, it happened at 11:45, but what the fuck does that mean? Anthony, we gotta think this through. Turn off the lights and wait to see if he leaves. We all sat there, realizing that regardless of how scared we were, regardless of what had happened, we had nothing to tell the cops. We had nothing. We couldn't tell them about Chris coming home, because that story would break down due to total lack of evidence. No texts were on my phone, nothing. We couldn't tell them about Chris dropping the bag off at Anthony's because the second they asked what he looked like and what he drove, Dr. Anthony Jovid would have to say, "Oh, he looked like the guy standing next to me and he drove the car I came here in." We had nothing. We sat there in the car with nothing left to do but wait. 11:47 p.m. We sat there, all of us in shock and pure fear. The cops were less than a stone's throw away from us, and we knew if we saw anything, we'd book it from the car and just go grab a police officer. Until then, we had nothing to go on. We just stared at the only entrance to the Tim Hortons we could see, the one we had gone in and out of several times, the one that led to the parking lot where I had that cigarette. "I'm burning up, I need to cool down, this is getting to me," Christopher said. I could only imagine how frayed my poor husband's nerves were at this point, so I reached over and put on the AC. There was no fucking way I would be doing down a window. We had never seen that thing arrive or leave the coffee shop. Who knew what he was capable of? The AC turned on, and once again the hum of the fan filled the car with a much-needed noise, and all we did was stare at that damn door. "If you're putting on the AC, I'm gonna put on this sweater. Peter, is this yours?" Anthony asked from the back seat. "Yeah, go ahead, it's..." "Wait, Anthony, what color is the fucking sweater?" Anthony, "It's blue with a hood." Me, "Get the fuck out of the car now. Go, go, go." I had taken my blue sweater out of my car when I went for a cigarette while we were still waiting. I was wearing my blue sweater. That was the creature's replication of my blue sweater. We were inside the fucking creature's car. We couldn't tell the difference because there was no difference. This was the car that had driven to Anthony's house when Chris delivered the gift bag. The three of us frantically tried to open the doors, but they wouldn't budge. It was like they were welded shut. Christopher reached into the middle console and pulled out the emergency. "If you're in a fire in your car, use this to break the windshield hammer I made him buy," and pounded away at the glass. Nothing, not even a scratch. We were trapped inside the creature's car. "Press the fucking horn," screamed Anthony from the back. We were in the police parking lot. They were sure to hear us, but nothing. We tried and tried. We tried screaming, kept trying the doors. Anthony was lying on the back seat trying to kick the door open as hard as he could, but the glass refused to give. Then suddenly the smell, that rank, odorous smell. Rotten meat, fetid flesh, acrid, pungent, all-consuming, came pumping out of the AC vents. I tried to turn off the AC, but the car continued to fill with the smell. There was nothing we could do. I could hear Anthony retching in the back seat. This was his first exposure to it, and he couldn't handle it. Christopher had covered his nose and mouth with his hand, but was trying very hard to hold back vomit. All three of us kept trying the doors, but they were not moving. "Oh fucking hell, look!" screamed Christopher, his voice muffled by his own hand. Across the road, standing, holding his suitcase with his hat and coat on, stood Chris. He was pointing to us. I could almost feel that pointed finger rubbing across my face. I had never been more scared in my entire life. The smell was overpowering. The sight was overpowering. I was praying to faint, just so I wouldn't have to deal with this situation. But my body wouldn't let me. Then the creature slowly, methodically moved his hand and pointed to another car. To our car, parked in Tim Hortons' parking lot. Exactly where this one had been. In the exact spot. Impossible. Utterly impossible. What could this creature do? What was he capable of? The smell made screaming impossible, so in order to breathe as much as possible, we all just stopped yelling and just looked at the creature, Chris. He began crossing the road. In smooth, very human, unassuming steps, he made his way across the road. He was standing in the parking lot, holding his suitcase and slowly advancing towards us. By now, we could all see his trademark feature. It was my husband, it was my Christopher. It was the love of my life, but with the most grotesque, oversized, swollen upper lip. It looked infected and engorged. I put both my hands on my Christopher, shielding him from the creature that was approaching from the passenger side of the vehicle. He came extremely close. We were frozen in terror. No one dared move. Anthony was pressing up against the door opposite to the creature, filled with a fear reserved for children and those in war zones. And then the creature made its way to Anthony's passenger side window. Not so close as to touch the window, but close enough for Anthony to know he was the one that the creature wanted. He couldn't scream, he was paralyzed with fear as we all were. The creature raised his hand, his perfectly human-shaped, perfectly Christopher-shaped hand, and pointed at Anthony, and then made the no gesture, waving one finger from side to side. He was signaling what the rim of the coffee cup had told us. Anthony shouldn't have been there. 1 + 1 is 2. He wanted Christopher and I, and wanted nothing to do with Anthony. He looked me dead in my eyes, upper lip pulsating, and then looked at Christopher. He averted his gaze quickly, as if he couldn't stand seeing what my Christopher, what the real Christopher looked like. And then he was gone. He turned around, suitcase still firmly in hand, and walked away. He walked to the left of us, that's all we saw. We never saw where he went. He just vanished into the night. By the time the creature was out of sight, the awful smell died down. The locks of the car flew open, and the three of us threw ourselves out of the vehicle. Anthony couldn't stand. The overwhelming stench was too much for him, but I propped him up and Christopher held the door to the police station. We were inside in a flash, Anthony's dead weight and all. A police officer rushed towards us. "What's going on? Is he okay?" asked the police officer. He reached to his shoulder-mounted radio and spoke into it. DI-52, DI-52, 3 males, 1 injury. Med staff to the lobby. Anthony sprang up. The cool, clean air of the inside of the police station drove the life back into him like a hammer to a nail. "We're being stalked, we're being followed, we're being fuck." Anthony had reached his point. He had been singled out by the creature. He had been pointed at, and it was all too much for him to bear. He just started weeping uncontrollably, not knowing how to handle any of this. "Officer, we need to file a police report immediately." Chris, ever the present lawyer, took control of the situation. "Okay, I'm Officer Michael Hahn. I'll take the report, but your friend needs help." Right as he finished, a male officer wearing gloves and carrying a medical supply kit came around the corner and approached us. He could see Anthony in distress and immediately started to attend to him. Officer Hahn: "Okay, gentlemen, care to tell me what's going on?" "Me. I'm Dr. Peter Tillman, and this is my husband Christopher Tillman. We're being stalked and threatened, and we need to be protected." Christopher: "The person stalking us has assumed my identity and has been charging things to my credit card, attempted to use," steal wasn't an appropriate word and Christopher knew it, "my vehicle, and even entered my home while my husband was there by himself." Officer Hahn: "Okay, I understand the panic, but who's your friend and what does he have to do with this?" Christopher: "His name is Dr. Anthony Jovid, and he's my cousin. He's been helping us out since we realized that we weren't safe." Officer Hahn: "And how long has that been?" Christopher and I blankly stared at one another, not knowing how to answer this man's question. We couldn't tell him everything because he would think we were crazy, but at the same point we had to disclose what happened. Christopher: "Since yesterday, around 8 p.m. That's when he entered my home, impersonated me, and attempted to harass my husband." Officer Hahn: "Okay, do you know where this person is now?" Anthony pulled off the oxygen mask that they had placed over his mouth. The on-site nurse had propped him up in a chair so that he could be safe if he fainted. "Show him the car!" he screamed. Well, it wasn't a scream since he had no energy with which to do so. Christopher and I took Officer Hahn outside the door, waiting to show him the duplicate car that the creature had conned us into getting into. But nothing. The car was gone. I looked across the road and just as expected I could see my car, my real car. Or I thought it was my real car, sitting in the parking lot of the Tim Hortons. Not wanting to risk it, I told the officer to come with us across the road. He radioed in to tell the control board where he was going, and crossed the road with us. Anthony remained in the police station after all. The creature apparently didn't want him. Officer Hahn, Christopher, and myself approached the vehicle, not knowing what to expect. The cop took out his flashlight and shone it inside the car. Officer Hahn: "This your vehicle, sir?" Christopher: "Yes, it's registered in both our names, Officer Hahn. Please open the doors. If you do not mind, Christopher." "Not at all. Please have a look around." The police officer thoroughly searched the vehicle, even lifting the bottom part of the trunk and rifling through the glove compartment. We waived any right we had to unnecessary search and seizure and let the man do his job. Of course, there was nothing. Nothing at all. Officer Hahn, come back with me to the station and fill out the paperwork. We'll see how your friend's doing. If he needs to go to the hospital, I'll ride him over. If not, there's not really much we can do, gentlemen. Christopher. But well, how? Peter. Nothing, officer. Christopher, he's right. There's not much he can do. Thank you, sir. We'll fill out the paperwork. We all got into the car, including Officer Hahn, who we asked to accompany us, and went back to the station in order to fill out the paperwork. It took less than 20 minutes, and Anthony had recovered well enough to come with us. We thanked the police and went into the parking lot. I unlocked the car and looked around to make sure nothing was off. But what the hell could I prove? What did I know anymore? Nothing. We couldn't tell what was real from what was fake anymore. We sat in the car, engine running, for about 15 minutes and discussed what we should do. The suggestions ranged from a hotel to Anthony's to our house to just staying in the parking lot. Regardless of where we went, this creature would find us. At least we had filled out the police report, and Officer Hahn took us serious enough to say he would come by tomorrow and check on us. It was about 1 a.m. by the time all of this was finished. Anthony and I decided to go to my mom's place in Yorkville. It was a penthouse with more than enough room to house us, and frankly, it seemed that this creature, this fake Chris, was only after myself and Christopher. So we knew we would be safe there. And it was only a few minutes away. I called my mom, and she said to come on over. She's a bit of a night owl, and I didn't give her any details about why we were in the area or why we wanted to come over. She just said to stop on by. So we went. On the drive, I asked Christopher for the paperwork that the cop had given us, just so I could make sure it was safe. There was now an official record of what had happened to us, and I wanted to make sure my copy was reachable, just in case. I took one glance down at the paper. I wasn't shocked, I wasn't surprised, I wasn't off-put. I was just plain terrified. Instead of a detail of the incident in the section meant for that, it only said the same 3 words over and over and over. New beginning tomorrow. New beginning tomorrow. New beginning tomorrow. I'm at my mom's house now. I sit and wait for tomorrow. This is starting to make more sense now. I guess all debts do need to be paid. Anthony, Christopher, and I pulled up to the entrance of my mother's condominium. It had a beautiful circular driveway, a gate that allowed people and vehicles in and out, and an extremely ornate fountain in the center of the courtyard. 24-hour valet parking was a nice perk. Anthony, are you sure that you want to let some poor unsuspecting valet drive this car? What if that thing decides he wants to take it for another spin? Me. Honestly, at this point, I doubt that it's after anyone but me and Chris. I mean, you were singled out. He pointed right at you. Anthony. Thanks, Pete. I really needed to be reminded of that. Anthony was still obviously shaken, but also extremely relieved that he was not being hunted. Or haunted. Whatever the right word may have been. The valet approached the car, a young woman about 25 years old in a sharp brass button jacket and matching pants. Hello, Mr. Tillman, I hope this night finds you doing well, she said, looking at Christopher. I presume you're here to see Mrs. Blockbauer? I recognized the valet. Elise, I think her name is, always very sweet. I am, but I don't think we'll be needing you to park the vehicle. We'll drive ourselves. Christopher had made the decision to spare this poor woman from whatever horrors she could potentially be subjected to by driving the car. What has my life become? Letting a valet park a car was now a hazard to be avoided because a face-stealing creature might stink her to death? God, I just wanted relief. We turned the car into the underground parking lot. My mother's condo was the largest ones in the building, and as such it entitled her to 6 reserved parking spaces. As we descended, a serious feeling of unease enveloped all of us. We were going underground? After a night like this? The smiling faces of the 3 security guards we saw walking around reassured us, but God knows why. This thing was capable of manifesting unnoticed in a busy restaurant and replicating a full-size car. 3 security guards would be useless. Hell, the entire Air Force would probably be of no use to us at this point. We parked and sat in the car. All of us were a combination of exhaustion and terror, not really knowing what we were supposed to do with ourselves. Anthony, as always, broke the silence that we had opted for. Do you really want to involve your mother in this? Christopher sternly shot back at him. Anthony, you heard what Peter said. It doesn't want anything to do with you. 1 plus 1 is 2, you're safe, and I'm sure his mom is too. I agreed with Christopher and pointed out that we should at least leave the basement. We exited the vehicle and hurried to the elevator. Another closed space, crap. Christopher pushed the button, and due to the good services of the valet, the elevator arrived very quickly with her inside of it. "Good evening, Doctor. Tillman, how are you tonight?" she asked in a very comforting tone. "You wouldn't believe if I told you," was the only thing that came out of my mouth. I don't know why. It just made the elevator ride to the penthouse very awkward. "Well, I hope your tomorrow is much better than your tonight has been." She was such a sweet girl, and that's really what we all needed in that moment. Unadulterated comfort, since whatever semblance of peace we had in our lives had been completely stripped away. We rode the rest of the way in complete silence. The elevator doors opened into the hallway, and Christopher and Anthony left very quickly. Tensions were still running high. "Take care, Dr. Tillman," the valet said from inside the elevator. I turned and smiled. "And don't worry, sir, I'm sure you'll find your suitcase. It'll be in the garage when you get home." She smiled. The door closed. My blood ran cold. Christopher and Anthony were too far ahead of me to notice what she had said. The creature knew we were here. There really was no outrunning this thing. I either had to live with it or kill myself. I was just left standing in the hallway. Christopher turned and looked at me. "Babe, are you okay? Come on, let's just get inside." I shook myself back to reality, whatever that was, and booked it to the apartment door. There were 2 penthouse suites on the floor, one on either side of the hall. We rang the doorbell, and the comforting Westminster chime sounded. One of the night maids opened the door. "Good evening, Doctor." "Tillman, your mother is reading on the terrace. I'll let her know you're here." I wasn't 12 anymore. I knew reading on the terrace was code for smoking a joint. It was quite chilly. There was no way she was reading outside. We all made our way to the living room and collapsed into individual chairs. It had been 24 hours since this all started. Well, a bit over that, but it was only the night before that the creature had slept next to me. It had only been about 8 hours since we were at Anthony's, and had only been 2 hours since my irrationality was confirmed by our encounter with Chris in the parking lot. Being in my mom's condo made me feel safe. Thank God she still had that affect on me. My mother had smoked pot since the 70s, but it wasn't until I had my own issues with drugs that she divulged that fact to me. Something about making me feel more connected to her and making it easier for her to put me into rehab. Pot, meth, yeah, really not the same thing, but whatever made the poor woman feel more connected to me. I hate that version of myself. I don't think of that Peter. That Peter died in rehab. Darlings, how are you? Anthony, it's been far too long. Chris, how was Vienna? My mother turned the corner into the living room, Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, vintage, of course, flowing in the breeze coming from the open terrace door. She was finishing up the chocolate chip cookie that was her favorite munchie. She wasn't one for coming second in a conversation and dominated any room she was in. Think Dame Edna meets Barbara Walters. "I'm okay, Mom. Just exhausted. We've had a pretty intense afternoon." I decided to not sugarcoat anything and just be straightforward with her. "Peter, what's wrong?" My mother's tone had changed. She was now obviously concerned and wanted every detail of why we were there and where we had come from. She walked over and sat next to Christopher, facing me. "Mom, something's following us. I don't know what. I don't know how long it's been around, but yesterday it..." This was the 3rd time in less than 24 hours that I found myself telling the story about the creature sleeping next to me. And for some reason it hurt more. It terrified me more to tell it to my mother. I knew how much she cared about me, and how it had only been her and I since Dad passed away, so I knew telling her this would cause her so much pain. Yesterday it shared a bed with me. I just blurted it out. Tonight wasn't the night for filters. My mother is a pale woman, but whatever color she had in her face drained instantly. There was no hiding her emotions. She was terrified. Something had tried to hurt her little boy, and she believed me. Then again, I was always open, even with the drug usage, so she had no reason to believe I was lying. "What do you mean it shared a bed with you? Did you have sex with it? And what the hell is it? What sort of creature are you referring to?" I think it was the tone or the straightforward abruptness of her questions that set me on edge. This was the first time I was telling the story and it was being believed, but her reaction seemed so controlled, her questions so clean and methodical. "No, I did not have sex with it, Mother. I raised my voice in a vainglorious attempt at self-defense, only to realize that I shouldn't be yelling at my mother. It's Christopher. Well, it's not really Christopher, obviously, but it looks exactly like him, only it's thicker. Or it was thicker. And it has this god-awful lip that looks like it's about to explode. My mother shot out of her seat and stood stock still, arms akimbo. Peter Jurga Tillman, you've been doing drugs again, haven't you? What is it this time? Cocaine, LSD, methamphetamine, heroin again? She rarely yelled at me, but this was almost at the top of her voice. The maid who was within sight made herself scarce. Mother, I have not. I was standing now, my large frame dominating my mother. Two bulls rearing to attack one another. Paula, he's telling the truth. I wouldn't have believed him either, but I saw it with my own eyes. Christopher, my staunch defender, said as he slowly stood up and put his hand on my mother's shoulder. Peter, I'll tell her the rest. No, I don't want to hear the rest. That's enough for one night. You boys need to get some rest, and in the morning we'll discuss this. I'm exhausted, and frankly, my mind's not clear enough to talk about monsters and boogeymen right now. She was defiant and unyielding. I knew from how she was acting that she was in no mood to hear our story, but this was very odd. My mother was never one to doubt me, and was never one to fly into a rage when confronted with a good piece of gossip or news. For fuck's sake, Mother, we're being stalked and could be in danger. I couldn't hold it in. I rarely swore around her. I'm a grown man and I still don't curse in front of my mother, but this time it was warranted. You're in one of the safest buildings in the city. Nothing can get you here. Boys, please change and make yourselves comfortable. Anthony, I'm sorry, but I don't have anything in your size, but we'll get you some toiletries and a robe. You can have a nice warm shower. Christopher, Peter, help yourselves. She wandered out of the room and directed Anthony to Sylvie, one of the night staff who was too busy pretending that she did not hear my mother reference my drug-addled past to realize that my mother had walked up behind her. Sylvie, this is Anthony. Please show him to a room and make him comfortable. My mother, ever the hostess. Christopher had left the room to go and change. He had showered when we had returned home from the airport, but that was hours ago. And after all the sweating and insanity that we had gone through, he figured that a nice long shower would do him some good. I refused to let him go and told him to shower with the door open. I refused to let him be out of sight for any reason. I found myself standing alone in the cavernous living room, staring out the wall of windows. The city was beautiful at night, but the only thing on my mind was when the creature would strike next. He had already sent me a message via the valet. He knew I was here. What would happen? What the hell did he want? And why me? Come with me onto the terrace, my mother said as she walked up behind me. Jesus, don't scare me like that. Not after what I've gone through. I sternly said to her. It's bad enough that you think I'm crazy. Put your jacket on and come with me onto the terrace. Bring your cigarettes, she ordered. My mom had smoked cigarettes until she was pregnant with me, or so she claimed, and hated the fact that I smoked tobacco. Marijuana's a beautiful, healthy plant, no carcinogens, was always her retort whenever I threw the fact that she smoked pot in her face. My mother didn't wait for me and was already out on the terrace, second or potentially third, joint lit. She inhaled deeply. Sit down. She gestured to the lounger that was 3 feet away from me. I don't feel like sitting, I'd rather stand. I lit my cigarette. My mother had her back to me and was looking out over the city. I had never really seen her like this, not since Dad died. She was usually very upbeat and energetic. Pot never had a downer effect on my mother, but rather made her mind flow more easily and helped her to have that zest she was known for. Which one happens first? The smell or the sight? My mother quietly asked, still facing the city. I coughed. I had smoked for 15 years. I knew how to smoke, but that question caught me off guard completely. I coughed hard, trying to catch my breath. What? What did you say? I wheezed at her. I was trying to scream, but like Anthony in the police station, the first question just knocked the wind out of me. Mom, what happens first? Do you see him, or do you smell him? Me. How do you know about the smell? Has he been here? Did he hurt you? Mom, answer the question, Peter. Do you smell him first, or do you see him first? Me. It's always the smell. I'm not telling you anything else until you tell me what you know. Mom, is it the lip or the eyes? Me. What, Mom? Is it his lip that bulges out, or is it his eyes? Which one? I know you said something about his lip, but I want to make sure. She hadn't turned to face me. At all. I could tell from the sound of her voice that her throat was starting to tighten, as if she was on the verge of tears. I hated seeing my mother cry, but I wanted some damn answers. Me. It's his lip. Mom, did he give you anything? Has he left you any notes or cards? I took the crumpled police report from my pocket and handed it to her. I pointed out the section where the incident report was supposed to have been. New beginning tomorrow, new beginning tomorrow, new beginning tomorrow. Mom, okay, it's time to pay the debt. All debts must be paid. All dues have to be collected. My mother turned around, tears were streaming down her face. I slowly walked up to her and she took another drag from the dying joint. Peter, we need to talk about your future, about what's going to happen, she tearfully said. I knew that this was my chance to finally get some answers, to finally understand what was happening in my life. But to know that my mother knew something about this and never said anything enraged me. How could you not tell me about this? How could you keep something like this a secret? I asked, both hurt and angry. Actually, I was livid, virtually vibrating out of sheer and total rage, teeth clenched. We were told you had more time. They told us that they would only come after we had both died, after you had your son. She put her hand on my shoulder, and out of rage I pushed her away. Who is they? What is going on? I demanded answers. The rage had vanished and was instantly replaced with a fear of not knowing, and a sadness that my mother knew without telling me anything. Son, our past is a lie. Your father was never very good at... Well, he really was never very good at anything. Your grandparents were amazing. Both his parents and my parents knew one another before the war during the time in the camps. His parents were sent to Buchenwald and my parents were dumped into Mauthausen. Luckily, none of them, his parents nor mine, were sent to Auschwitz or Bergen-Belsen, but Buchenwald was no luxury hotel. When they left the camps at the end of the war, they ran into one another as they made their ways across a war-ravaged Europe. Your father's mother and my father even started a business together. They were cloth merchants. Not rich by any standards, but it was the 40s. The name of the game wasn't get rich, it was survive. We were poor, our poverty stemmed back generations, but we always made ends meet. Eventually, our parents drifted and lost touch with one another. When your father was a teenager, he came back to Germany to find work, and there he found me. We fell deeply in love within a matter of weeks, our parents not knowing, and frankly, we had no clue that they knew one another. Our courtship became more intense, and finally we realized that we had to tell our parents. He wrote back to his father and mother, and I brought him home to meet my parents. Within the first 5 minutes of meeting my parents and finding out who his parents were, my father had spat at him and told him to never enter our house again. This was a story that I had never heard, and I was still not seeing how this had anything to do with me or the creature. What the hell does this have to do with the damn creature? I interrupted. She paid me no mind and continued to talk. My father told me to never bring him back to that house. My mother barely said a word. I was shocked. I had no idea why they would behave like this. Later that night, I went to my mother and asked what could have made Papa react as strongly as he had. My poor mother broke down crying and told me that while her husband and your father's mother were busy trying to make ends meet, she and your father's father were busy. Well, busy staying busy. I knew this meant that my paternal grandfather and my maternal grandmother had had an affair. I was slightly disappointed, but that entire generation was dead, and none of this was explaining what the creature had to do with anything. Their spouses finally found out and were livid. My father threatened to leave my mother and never talk to her again. He called her a whore and asked how, when he had gone hungry many nights in the camp saving scraps for her to eat, that she could throw herself at another man. My mother really had no defenses against this and became extremely depressed after her affair with your paternal grandfather ended. Anyway, your father and I refused to be separated. We refused to let our parents' hatred for one another get in the way of our love. We loved one another so much, Peter, you have to believe me. We were so madly in love and refused to let one another go. We were both kicked out of our homes and told never to return. We were poor. We were beyond poor. Neither him nor I had any schooling. We had no funds to get by on, and it wasn't like the olden days when we could farm. Europe was changing, and we needed to make money. Your father got a job at a bank that paid him a meager wage. He was a teller, but that was probably because the bank manager thought she would be able to convince your father to fuck her if she kept him employed. I had never heard my mother speak with so much vulgarity before. I kind of liked that she was letting it go, and at the same point was at my wit's end. I didn't need to hear about the family history. I just wanted to know what was happening. And then one day it changed. It all changed. Your father came home and told me that he had saved up all of his earnings and had dumped them into the markets. "We're going to be rich, Paula," he would say. "We're never going to have to worry again." He was 22 at this point. And he was right, we became rich. And not regular rich, very rich. We became ultra-wealthy, millions and millions and millions of dollars within a few years. I would ask from time to time how the markets were doing, and he would always tell me, "Don't worry, Paula. I would never let anything happen to us. Our family is going to be secure. Our children will be happy." By the time your father was 30, he was worth more than our entire town put together. He was loved all through Germany and was a celebrated financier. People would spend days traveling and wait hours just to see him, just to get a tip. And it always paid off. I never questioned it because I was too busy spending. The joint had gone out and my mother had sat herself down in the chair she originally told me to sit in. Then one day we were at the park. Everyone knew who we were and everything was going so well. You were still in my tummy and I was about 4 months along. I just needed some air. And then the smell. Oh, Peter, the smell. It was like someone had taken my face and shoved it into a dead, rotting carcass of a pig. I threw up instantly. Your father was white as a sheet. I turned and looked at him after gathering myself. "We need to leave, Paula. We need to leave now," was all he said. He grabbed my arm and pulled me away, but standing no more than 10 feet in front of us was your father. I almost fainted. If it wasn't for you giving me strength, I would have. Your real father tried to turn us away, but when we turned around the creature, your father was standing behind us. It was impossible. Nothing moves like that. The creature started to move towards us. As he got closer, I saw that he was carrying a suitcase, and the smell became stronger and stronger. No one else in the park seemed to notice this, only us. It was a packed park, and there was my husband standing in front of my husband, and nothing seemed strange to anyone. This thing walked up to us, his eyes were almost bulging out of its head. And the stench, oh God, Peter, the stench. We were both frozen in terror, your father's grip on my hand almost vice-like as the creature approached me. He extended his hand, everything about it looked normal except for his eyes. He extended his hand and placed it on my stomach and rubbed it. I was on the verge of passing out. What kind of deal did my parents make? What was going on? What the hell was all of this? My mother continued, "The creature spoke. It spoke just like your father. Nothing was off. Its voice was a perfect copy. When it is time, we will come. Your husband owes us, and we always collect our dues." I passed out. I fainted straight to the ground. By the time I came to, about 10 people from the park had come to surround me, and your father was leaning over me. I pulled myself up, and we pretended that nothing had happened. The crowd dispersed, and we went back to the bench we were sitting on. The smell was gone. I screamed at your father when I knew I could. I asked him what was going on, what the hell that thing was, and why was he rubbing my stomach. I was a fool. I was an arrogant, greedy fool, and now it's time to pay. Paula, the money, the houses, the cars, everything was based on a promise. Years ago, while working at the bank, I went out for a cigarette behind the building. I noticed a man standing there. He smelled awful and had a suitcase with him. Everyone in Europe was still poor and starving, and I felt sorry for him. I felt like I could help. No one should smell like that. I approached him and offered him something to eat. The man smiled back at me and said he was okay. I even offered him to come home and visit us. He was a straggler. He needed some help. I remember what my father told me about his life. Sometimes we all need help. "Oh, Paula, forgive me," your father cried. Your father finished by telling me that the man put his hand on your father's shoulder and said he, your father, could have everything he dreamed of because your father showed him kindness. The man promised your father that everything would be okay, that your father and I would make money, that anything your father touched would turn to gold. Your father thought the man was just crazy and was trying to be nice to him because he offered help. The next day your father's stocks jumped. He didn't have much, but he saw he could buy a few more shares and hope for the best. And then they jumped again and again and again. He got the taste of money and he liked it. After the first few millions and everything him touching turning to gold, your father left the bank and started his own company. The day he moved into his new office in Hamburg, his newly hired secretary told him an old friend was here to see him. Your father had plenty of old friends, hangers-on, would-be millionaires, down-on-their-luck businessmen, all wanting a piece of the pie. Your father told her to let him in, but the secretary said that the man wanted to meet your father outside. Your father sat there, and then the smell hit him. The stench coming off that man with the suitcase all those years ago. You don't forget a smell like that. Your father hurried down the stairs to meet the man that had blessed him. How could someone who had told my father he would see luck be anything but wonderful? How could he be bad? Your father ran down into the streets, and there, standing across the road, was the man with the suitcase. Your father ran across the street, traffic be damned, and followed the man who had started to move. "Sir, friend, slow down. I want to thank you. Your kind words gave me everything." The man turned down another street, and your father followed. Suddenly, the man stopped and turned. He had the most awful bulging lip your father had seen. Much different from the last time he had seen him. But the awful smell was just the same. Thick and pungent. "Wilhelm, you've done so well for yourself. I'm happy you liked my gift," the man said. Your father was confused. He didn't receive a gift from the man, only his good blessings. "What gift do you mean?" asked your father. "Everything," said the man. "We've given you everything, but if you'd like more, we can make that happen." Your father was a skeptical man and never took anything for granted. When he told me this story, he also relayed how this man could stare straight into his soul. He knew what your father wanted, Peter, and that was money. "Wilhelm, we gave you the world, and we can give you more. All we ask is your equal payment. Millions, even billions of dollars, everything you've desired." The man's voice was calm and like a father. Your father wanted everything, Peter. He wanted more than he could spend. Greed got the better of him. "Another blessing, my friend? Absolutely. I will take whatever you can give me." The man with the suitcase put his hand on your father's shoulder and told him that when the time was right, everything would come to him and everything would be equal. All would be equal. All debts must be paid, all dues must be collected. Your father didn't agree nor disagree, but the man with the suitcase knew your father couldn't resist. I just sat in that park bench, pregnant with you, holding my stomach, realizing what your father had done. I swear, Peter, I knew nothing until that point. And the years went by and the money got bigger. We never made billions. We were close in the 80s, but never hit it. For years after that, we would have cryptically written clues show up around us. Words inside books would rearrange themselves. Random people would ask us if we had found our suitcase. Messages on sales receipts, even once on the inside of your backpack when you were a toddler. It stopped for a while, but I knew this day would come. The notes told us that they would only come after we died, after you had a chance at a life. And then your father died. We had never seen the man again, but we were never allowed to forget him. The day of your father's funeral, I went to the bathroom in the funeral home to tidy myself up. I was alone until the smell. Oh God, the smell. It came wafting through the vent. I thought for sure this was going to be where I died too, and frankly, I wished it was. I tried to leave, but the handle on the door wouldn't move. I turned around, and as if out of thin air, he was standing there. Your father, with the bulging eyes. I had stared at Wilhelm's cold body in that coffin all morning, and now there he was, standing there. Until I saw the eyes, Peter, I knew when I saw the eyes that the creature had come back. "Don't be afraid, I'm not here for you," he said in your father's voice. "We only collect what we're owed. Wilhelm had a heart attack, so the burden falls on you. You know what we want, and we'll come and get it when the time was right." I averted my eyes for a second, and he was gone. The door to the bathroom opened, and I ran into the hall. I looked out the door, and I could see him, the creature with the bulging eyes, walking through the parking lot. "Peter, they've come for their dues, and they expect payment." My mother walked off the balcony, and I sat there. I didn't have questions, I was just in shock. I was told we were owed money, that it was inherited from grandparents who died long before I was born. I had to confront the creature, and was going to, or live in terror forever. She came back very quickly, crying softly, and just handed me a card. It was the business card from my father's first company, when he shook hands with the creature, so to speak, and mortgaged my life for his undeserved wealth. New Beginnings Financial Investment Corporation. I don't know how long I sat on the terrace. The morning was very brisk, especially for a July, but this was Toronto, and Canada has had some awful summers lately. I think I focused on the wind because it distracted me from the vacuum that my life had been thrown into. A gaping, sucking void from which there was evidently no escaping. The creature was able to manifest in Germany, in Canada, in England, everywhere. My parents and I traveled extensively when I was younger, and wherever we had gone, apparently the ghastly writing would follow. The notes never ended. Mom and Dad were never allowed to forget that their child had been bargained for a success that had happened overnight. I finally stood. Actually, that's a lie. I didn't have the ability to stand. I lurched myself out of the chair and propped myself up against the column that abutted the chair I sat in. I had smoked through almost an entire pack of cigarettes, and one of the night maids was nice enough to bring me 2 bottles of wine. I had lost all concept of time. It must have been about 4:30 in the morning at this point. I could see the occasional bird flying around. I knew dawn would soon wash away this god-awful night. But then what? I had all the money I could possibly ever need, and Christopher and I could just run away somewhere, but anywhere we went, that thing would follow. And I didn't do anything to deserve it. I had kicked the drug habit. I had reformed myself. Hell, I even made sure that in all of my wild years of sex and partying that I never contracted anything. Safe sex. Always. But what was it all for? I should have just wasted away my life in some run-down shithole outside of Bern or London or Venice. I should have partied away my life and enjoyed what I had been sold for, before this reaper came to claim his prize. All debts must be paid, all dues must be collected. I finally entered the condo and made my way to the east dining room and collapsed into one of the chairs. I was an angry man, an angry bitter man, an angry bitter drunk man, who had to teach a class in a matter of hours. That definitely wasn't going to happen. How the fuck was I going to go to school again? To go about my life, to do anything? Christopher and I had planned so many good years to come. Children, a vacation home, retiring, endless travel. How could I do any of that now? How could I do this to Christopher? Children were certainly out of the picture, and there was no way I could have Christopher constantly looking over his shoulder for the day that his double would finally just come and take me. God, to know that I was claimed. The staff turned over at 5 a.m., and I saw 2 of the maids changing out of their uniforms and into their regular clothes. I knew that I had to start tackling this, but how the hell would I go about even starting? How would I deal with this? I reached for my phone. The class was at 8:30, and if I sent out a broadcast message to my students, I would save a good number of them the annoyance of coming to an 8:30 class, only to find that their professor wasn't there. 2% battery life. That's all I had left in my phone. I had to find a charger. I hit the page button, and luckily Sylvie hadn't clocked out yet. I asked her, my breath smelling of Chateauneuf de Pape, a good vintage at least, and my words slurred, if she could source me a charger for my iPhone. She could see that I was in distress and had no doubt overheard the conversation between my mother, Anthony, Christopher, and I earlier on that night. Morning? She disappeared momentarily and came back, charger in hand. God, I loved her. She was such a useful person, like I had been before any utility in my life had been so unceremoniously stripped away. Here you are, Dr. Tillman. You should check your phone. He doesn't like to be kept waiting. She dropped the charger on the table and left the room. I was drunker than I realized, but I understood what she said. Within a few seconds of her leaving the room, the famous tritone that all iPhone users are familiar with sounded. It was an area code 647 number. It's cold in the house. I sobered up instantly. This was it. He was here. He was outside, and he knew that I knew what he wanted. I stood up and turned towards the hallways leading to the terrace. I hesitantly made my way down to the wall of windows that opened up to one of the absolute best views the city had to offer. Money, it buys so many things and nothing at all. I made my way to the door and turned the handle. If I wasn't sober before, the smell that came rushing into my nostrils certainly fixed that problem. I could smell him near. The same burning at the back of the throat, the same apprehensive feeling, the same taste of rotten flesh filling my mouth. Except this time I understood him. I understood that he wanted me. The terrace wraps around the corner of the building, at which point it stops and the terrace of the adjoining apartment begins. My mom's took over 3/4 of the floor space, and Mrs. Thompson Fitch, wife of the advertising magnate, 4th wife to be exact, owned the remaining 1/4. I turned the corner away from the view of the living room. The sun was slowly rising, and it was blue out. You know that time of morning where the sun begins to creep above the horizon? It wasn't quite dawn, but it wasn't quite night. I could see the creature standing at the far end of the terrace, back towards me. I froze. I was filled with the bravado of a wronged man leading up to the turn, but now was consumed with dread. Was this it? Was my life going to be claimed now? Was the debt to be collected? I stopped moving forward, and then in the Christopher's voice, in the voice of the man that I loved so much, the voice of the man who I would give everything for, the creature spoke. Hello, Peter. I couldn't respond. I just stood there and waited to die. Hello, Peter. Again, no response from me. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't bring myself to talk or even to feel at this point. Every atom in my existence was vibrating with fear, no excuses. Hello, Peter. I would appreciate a response. The creature seemed to be getting impatient. Chris's wanted to talk. Hell was the only thing I could manage to get out. I was so exhausted, so weak, so drained, so everything. All emotions that I had ever experienced in the negative sat on me like some kind of massive stone, waiting to crush me. Nothing happy, nothing contentful, nothing peaceable. Just the dead weight of a ruined life. The smell still lingered in the air, thick and acrid, like that smell of burnt hair. Paula spoke with you, she told you the deal. The creature continued, back still towards me. No sign of movement on his part. I still couldn't speak. Facing the back of him was like facing the back of every failed moment in my life, mixed with a terror so visceral and real you could cut it with a knife. She told you half the story. You should ask Christopher the other half. He said, still sounding exactly like Christopher, like he was referring to himself in the third person. And then he turned around. I could see the lip from 50 feet away. It had burst at this point and oozed a thick black substance that ran down the front of his coat. It looked a mixture of tar and water. Black enough to be tar, but flowed like water. Like dead, necrotized blood. I backed up, but there really wasn't much of place to back up. This sight terrified and burned me. It was like watching Christopher in pain, but knowing that it wasn't Christopher somehow didn't seem to help. He advanced forward. I was backed against the wall. I had nowhere to go, and as if controlled by another, my legs failed me. I couldn't bring myself to run left or right. The creature continued to advance forward. I noticed how much his walk was like Christopher's, with that stupid sort of dip that Christopher does when he walks slow, a result of too many high jumps off of cliffs into water when he was a teenager. I shut my eyes, like a child attempting to get away from a terrible sight, the smell of the creature getting stronger and stronger with each advancing step. I could feel hot, fresh tears streaming down my face. I was crying, not out of fear, but out of hopelessness. I had so many things that I wanted to do. I had so many wishes that I tried so hard to fulfill. All that was gone, and the only thing left was a blank IOU, waiting to be signed by whatever this creature walking towards me was. He stopped within arm's reach and raised his right hand to my face. The smell was almost unbearable. It was unbearable. I could feel myself dry heaving. I had smelled this stench several times in the past 24 hours, and this time the proximity brought me even closer to vomiting. I still hadn't opened my eyes, hoping beyond hope that somehow this would magic the creature out of existence, and I would wake up, next to my Christopher, heaving and panting after some kind of acrobatic lovemaking session. The creature placed his hand on my cheek. It was warm and exactly like Christopher's touch. That touch that had lifted me off the floor of the kitchen at the house party where first met. That touch that had held my hand when I stood in front of my parents and confirmed that we were getting married. That touch that had held me close the moments before my doctoral thesis defense. That touch which had held my face on the beach in the Seychelles and pulled me to his after saying I do. It was that last thought that made me open my eyes. The fact that I knew what I had, and I knew what I could lose in an instant if I didn't cooperate. It was the single most terrifying thing that I had experienced so far, to be that close the one that wanted to claim me. I fainted and hit my head on the concrete tile. Hard. Oh my God, Peter darling, my son, please wake up. I could see 3 blurry figures leaning over me and could feel that I was still obviously outside. My head was pounding and it took a few seconds for my vision to settle. It was Christopher, Anthony, and my mother. I shot up, standing straight upright. It was bright and hot outside, like a regular July day. How long had I been passed out for? I backed away from them, no longer knowing what was real and what had been the creature's doing. I hadn't forgot a thing. I turned and looked at Christopher. Which one are you? Are you real? Do you want me? What did you want me to do? How am I paying for this? Why did Hal fuck you? I collapsed onto the ground, crying like a child. My mother came near me and I started to scream. Scream like a parent who's just been told that their child had died. Scream like a husband who made it out of the house only to watch his wife die in the ensuing fire. Screamed like a man who had nothing left to live for. You did this. This was your fucking fault and his. Fuck you all, I never did this. You sold me. You lied to me. Dad fucking sold me. I stood up again, but once more, like being drunk on the terrace, I braced myself against the wall. I was still crying almost uncontrollably. Anthony came towards me and I leaned all my weight on him. The poor man. I was almost a foot taller, but he bore my full frame, soldier-carrying comrade through the jungles of Vietnam. No man left behind. He put me into a chair and just hugged me. I was hyperventilating and he straddled my legs and pressed his face into mine. Look at me, Peter. Look at me. Just count now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just breathe. Anthony was a small man, but I could see in that moment why he was a good physician. He took control of me in a way reserved for lovers and those I apparently owed debts to. It took about 3 minutes, but Anthony finally moved off of me and I regained composure. My mind was still racing, but my body was finally under control. The hyperventilating had stopped. I was starting to regain composure as best as I could. I looked down at my watch and it read 7 a.m. Good, early. I have 2 surgeries today. Are you going to be okay to be here without me? Anthony, my savior in that moment, asked while still within arm's reach. Yeah, I think I'll be fine. Can you come back when you're done? I asked him. Sure, no problem. My last one is at 3 p.m. I should be able to walk back over in 10 minutes. I'll call from the hospital when I get there and when I'm leaving, just in case I don't show up here. Anthony's composure was very reassuring. Anthony continued, I love you, man. Don't worry, we'll sort this out. I smiled as he turned and walked off the terrace, one of the day maids walking behind him. You need to cancel your class, Christopher said with authority. You need to explain to me what you know. I shot back at him. He was right. I did need to cancel my class, but I wanted answers more than anything. The creature had told me that Christopher knew more than he was letting on, and I wanted to get to the bottom of this. What do you mean? Christopher asked, with an obvious look of concern painted across his face. You know what I mean, Christopher. After you fell asleep last night, Mum told me everything. I continued in an almost cartoonish fashion to recite the events that transpired after Christopher went into the shower. From my mother telling me the truth, to meeting the creature, to being advised that the love of my life had not told me what he knew. Almost all in one breath. I felt like I was going to start hyperventilating again, but gathered myself knowing that Anthony wasn't there to be my knight in shining armor. Peter, I don't know what you're talking about. What you mean you met the creature? Did he look like me? What did he say to you about me? Christopher gave himself away. My eyes narrowed. I was on the verge of physically attacking him. What do you mean, oh? What did he say to you about me? Christopher, so fucking help me God, tell me what you know. I deserve the truth. I was screaming again. I was having a full-blown mental breakdown. My family was bargaining me like a pawn, and no one had the balls to tell me the truth. I had spent my life searching for the truth. Physics tries to understand the mechanics of this world, and to make sense of the anomalies that arise. Gamma-ray bursts, lenticular clouds, holes appearing in the ground in Russia. Our job was to take the mystical and bring it into the world of the real. To bring the impossible into the possible. This was impossible. Nothing I knew was real anymore. Dr. Megan wasn't real, Chris said bluntly. What? I asked in a confused fashion. The name had rang a bell, but I wasn't connecting the dots. Christopher finally opened up and told me the truth. Peter, I never went to sleep last night. Your mother left you on the terrace and came inside crying. I met her in the library, drinking by herself, and started talking to her. She told me everything. The one thing we couldn't figure out was why the creature looked like me. The fact that it resembled your father made sense. He had made the deal, but the fact that this iteration looked like me threw us both. We couldn't come up with a reason until I thought about your drug usage. I am not to blame for this. I fucked up my youth and had to work long and hard through rehab to get the fuck out of that situation. You have no idea what I went through. I shot back. That was my biggest personal triumph. I have nothing left in my life, and I felt like Christopher was robbing me of that as well. Fuck defending my doctoral thesis and being offered tenure. Dragging myself up by my bootstraps. Fixing my addiction problems was my greatest triumph. You died, Peter. Christopher bluntly said I didn't know what to make of that statement. I had no clue what he was talking about. What the hell do you mean? I mean, sure, there were blackout periods, but I never fucking flatlined. I scathingly threw back at him. You're the love of my life. You're the reason that I get up in the morning. There are weeks when I work 70 hours, but to know that I'll come home to your perfect body, my body was far from perfect, and your beautiful face and your gorgeous smell, I did smell pretty awesome. Just thinking about you makes me know that I found the one that gave me the reason to continue living, the one that drives me to succeed, and the one that I want to hold my hand as I close my eyes for the last time and leave this world. That's what you mean to me. Christopher was crying at this point. We found one another when you were at your worst. You were a strung-out tweaker, drug slang for one who does a ton of meth and then parties for days, that I helped up off the floor of the kitchen at a house party. You told me that I had the most beautiful eyes that you had ever seen. You made me realize that I was worth something. Peter, when you met me, I was so confused. I hated myself for liking men, and my parents' hate equaled mine. I had no drive to continue, but even in your drug-addled state, you knew how to make me feel like I was worth it. I fell in love with you, the only time I had truly been in love. When you were sober, you were the best, and when you were high, you fucked like a god, and I loved it. But I lost you in those moments of all-consuming drug binges. I was crying at this point. I loved Christopher, and this reminded me why. There was one particularly terrible night. We had spent the afternoon together and had lunch at Barberien, and spent the afternoon walking along the harbor front. It was a beautiful day. You left me and told me that you were going to meet David, your dealer, and my heart sank. When I had you, I had you. But when I let you go, you let yourself go. I just stared at Christopher. My mother was weeping and covering her mouth. Evidently, Christopher had told her this story earlier on that morning. Christopher continued. About 10 p.m. that night, I tried calling you and you weren't answering. I got a terrible feeling. Even at your worst, you always answered me. Even if the only thing I could hear was the pounding bass of whatever god-awful club you decided to tweak the night away in. But that night, I got no answer. I tried several times, and around 11 p.m. I finally gave up and called your parents' house. One of the night staff answered and advised me that you had been rushed to the hospital. You were at St. Michael's. I recalled bits and pieces of the night he was referring to, but only truly remembered regaining consciousness in the hospital bed, feeling perfectly fine. I remembered my mother mentioning how much she loved Dr. Megan for bringing me back, but that was it. I raced down the Gardner Expressway, going over 150 kilometers per hour. I didn't know what I was doing. I had had a couple of drinks with my friends and was pretty tipsy. It's pretty amazing that I didn't crash on the way there. I sped into the parking lot and ditched my father's Bentley in the entryway and just ran into the hospital. I found the emergency room, and at first they refused to let me see you. That's when I saw your mother. She was sitting in a chair, babbling to herself, talking about how you shouldn't climb so high on the monkey bars because you would fall and scrape your knee. In hindsight, I realized that the hospital stank. It reeked exactly like the King Edward Hotel. Exactly like the inside of our BMW in the parking lot. It wasn't until I was speaking with your mother last night that I remembered that. I guess in the moment I had blocked it out. I always hated hospitals, and I knew I had to get to you. I looked at my mother. She looked away. I ran up to your mother and crouched down so we were face to face. I asked her what was wrong, and she just kept saying, "Wilhelm, keep an eye on him. If he falls, he could scrape his knee." She was completely incoherent, and I expected the worst. I ran into the triage room where a terribly fat woman was complaining about hemorrhoids. The nurse yelled at me to leave, and I backed out of the room. An attending physician, Dr. Patel, finally found me in the hallway and led me away, firm hand on my shoulder. One of the daymaids had brought up a tray of juices and a tumbler of gin. It was a family tradition if we were going to drink at 8 a.m. Family rules dictated that it be gin. My mother had poured herself a rather large drink and invited the poor maid to have one too. She rebuffed Mum, but finally gave in. Christopher, gin in hand, continued telling the story. "Doctor," Patel walked me to where your mother was sitting. By this point, your mother had been moved into a separate waiting room. She kept staring at the empty chair next to her and saying, "He's going to be a physicist, you know, guaranteed to win a Nobel Prize." She didn't even realize that myself nor the doctor had entered the room. I was directed to a chair, and that's when my world ended. He looked at me and said, "Peter died from an overdose at approximately 10 p.m. tonight." My world collapsed, Peter. I understood why your mother, now showing the imaginary person sitting in the seat next to her the baby picture she carried around in her wallet, was acting the way she was. It was like someone had reached into me and ripped my stomach out through my mouth. I broke down and started to cry. The time was almost 11 p.m. at this point. You had been dead for almost an hour. I didn't know what to say, what to do, or how to continue. I had died for an hour? Medically speaking, this was impossible. Where was Anthony when I needed him? Oh right, relieving intracranial pressure in a 4-year-old. It's impossible to recover from an hour of death. But the rest of Christopher's story made me understand better what was going on. He continued speaking even though his voice was breaking down. Dr. Patel left the room. I had never felt more alone. He promised that he would return shortly after doing his rounds, and that I should contact a loved one to pick me up from the hospital. That's when Dr. Megan entered the room. She was a Filipino woman, about 5'6" with short black hair. She put her arm around me and apologized for what I was going through. In hindsight, I now realized that she looked slightly strange, like if her lip was slightly bigger, but nothing I cared about in that moment. The smell was also probably there, however, in that moment. The entire Santa Claus parade could have marched past me and I wouldn't have noticed. She put her hand on my leg and said, "We can bring him back." I was floored. I didn't know that you could bring someone back from over an hour of death. "Of course," I said, "of course I want to. Please." She removed her hand from my leg and looked me in her eyes. There was a strange coldness to the whole thing, but I didn't care. I just wanted you back. "It'll be difficult, but I think we can do it," Dr. Megan told me. I didn't care. I couldn't watch your mother go through this. I couldn't go through this. I wanted you back. "Do what you need to do," I told Dr. Megan. "Okay, but remember, all debts need to be paid and all dues are collected," Dr. Megan said without breaking eye contact. I just figured that this was some bullshit, take care of yourself thing that physicians said to the relatives of drug addicts so that we could scold you when they woke you. She left the room again and came back about 20 minutes later. I did not recall any of this. I do not recall anything. I was floored. Who was this miracle physician that had brought me back from the other side of the death? "You can come see him now, but you must bring his mother." She held the door open and pointed us in the direction of your room. I found it strange when I entered that you were almost normal, like nothing had happened to you. You were sitting up in bed just staring at the wall, waiting for us to walk in. I walked in and gave you the biggest kiss I'd ever given you. Your mother snapped back to reality and threw her arms around you. "Oh mein Lieblingssohn, ich werde dich nie gehen lassen. Oh my darling son, I'll never let you go," she exclaimed. Within 5 minutes, Dr. Patel had returned to your room, reviewed your chart, and gave us a smile. Another debt," was all he said, and left the room. We didn't care what he had to say. We had you back. Dr. Megan was a miracle worker, and that was it. You entered rehab within 2 days of being discharged from the hospital and never once went back to the drug. It was a miracle. You were virtually cured. About 3 months later, I returned to the hospital with a large bouquet of roses for Dr. Megan. This woman had brought you back from the brink of death. I went to the administration office and asked for her. The hospital had never employed a doctor. Megan, and the only female physician named Megan who worked there in the past year, was a rather rotund Chinese woman who looked nothing like the doctor that saved you that night. I never told anyone this. I figured that an angel had brought you back to us. Now I realized that it was something far different. I interjected at this point. If the doctor was chirping on about debts, how the hell did none of this ring a bell to you before, Mother? You must have known what was going on. I was glaring at my mother, red hot from the hatred that was starting to build for my family, but also from the hatred I had for myself for putting myself in that situation. My mother helplessly looked at me and said, "Peter, we had lived with this thing since before you were born. There is no questioning its intentions, and I promised your father years before that I would never say a word about the debt to anyone." What was I supposed to do? Tell Christopher, who I barely knew at that point, "Oh, my son is claimed by a magical man that follows us around the world"? This was the first time my mother had gotten angry at me after telling me the truth. I deserved it. Christopher contined, "You were meant to die. You had selfishly wasted your life, but the creature intervened. Your father's debt was not meant to be collected until after both your parents died, but you beat them to the punch. You died before your mother, and the creature refused to accept this, I imagine. So by brining you back, you yourself mortgaged your own life, Peter, not me. Dr. Megan could have let you die. The creature could have let you die. But you were offered redemption through me, and I knew you wanted it. I wanted you. I'm sorry, Peter, but you actually mortgaged your life. I was only the poor fucker that had to beg for it on your behalf. I had to be the greedy one in that moment. I had to beg for a life that had been so selfishly thrown away. Suddenly, the entire terrace filled with the same smell and all of us turned to the right. The creature was at the far end, appearing out of nowhere. He looked over at us, put the suitcase down, and opened it. Archived post. New comments cannot be posted and votes can. The most blinding, ethereal light I had experienced in my life emitted from the inside of the suitcase. I don't know what else I expected. A dead body, a massive amount of blood, my father's corpse. I don't know what, but the light shone brighter than anything I had ever experienced. I was knocked off of my feet, flat on my ass. But luckily, this time I was able to avoid my head making friends with the cement tiles, and maintained consciousness. My eyes adjusted. I looked around. I was still on the terrace, but my mother and my Christopher were not. I scrambled to my feet. My palms were bruised from bracing myself from the fall, and I wiped the flecks of blood that started to pool on the heel of my hand on my pants. I looked over to where the creature was standing, and he was still there. He was still shaped like Christopher, and his lip was still burst. He raised his hand and made the "come here" gesture with his finger, beckoning me. I ran in the opposite direction, around the corner, and back through the door into the condominium. "Christopher! Mom! Where are you?" I was frantic. Had this been the payment that the creature was seeking? Was he going to take everything that I loved in the world just for money? My mother's laugh and Christopher's smile was worth more than any amount of money could buy. If they were gone, I could see no reason to live, no reason to continue. A swan dive off of the terrace onto the hot, albeit comforting sidewalk 40-plus stories below would have been the choice I would have opted for. Why the fuck did one woman need so much space? That was the only thought that echoed in my mind as I ran through hallway upon hallway, screaming for both of them. I ran into my mother's room and up the stairs behind her bed to the second-floor area. That had its own balcony. Maybe I had passed out and she had run to where it was considered to be safe. We had done drills when she first moved in of where she would go if someone broke in and tried to kill her or hold her ransom, and the second-floor balcony in her bedroom was always considered the furthest from the main entrance. But nothing. She wasn't there. I couldn't find her anywhere. Christopher and I had stayed at the condo while our bedroom was being refinished, so he was intimately acquainted with the place. I ran from bedroom to bedroom screaming like a madman, almost begging him to emerge. But nothing. I started to run out of breath, snot and phlegm pouring from my nose and mouth respectively. Fuck, why did I smoke so much? "Christopher!" With the last ounce of strength that I had, I screamed. I bellowed. I begged. But nothing, just sheer unadulterated silence. I refused to give up. I ran out the main entrance and down the hallway. I pounded on Mrs. Thompson Fitch's door, screaming for her. Maybe in a mad dash, Christopher and my mother had run there. Nothing, no answer, no response. The old bitch was a terrible person, dripping with jewels and attitude, but I begged and prayed that she would answer her door. I kept pounding, but I never got the response I was so desperately seeking. My mind raced to alternatives. The fire alarm. If I couldn't find my family, I would throw the whole fucking building in a panic. I raced to where the elevator was and pulled the alarm. Dead silence. $15,000 a month in condo fees, and the fucking alarm wasn't working. This was bullshit. I hit the elevator button, but it refused to light up. I was running out of options, and fast. I decided that even though my smoker's lungs had failed me while I was running through the apartment, my best bet was to run down the stairs and have one of the valets call the cops. I had tried my hardest to avoid involving the police, since evidently my own family was the source of this newfound misery. I bolted for the stairwell door and grabbed the handle. Touching the handle seared my hand. Badly. "Fuck!" I screamed and looked at my palm. The scrapes from bracing myself from the fall on the terrace were virtually cauterized. No more bleeding, but my hand was badly burned. I took my shirt off and wrapped it around my other hand, hoping that this would allow me to turn the knob. I reached for the handle again, less hot but still burning. It refused to turn. The creature was refusing to let me leave. I sat on the ground. I didn't know what other options I had. I had to face him. I picked myself up after a minute or two and headed back into my mother's place. As I entered the condo, I realized that not only were Christopher and my mother missing, but so was everyone else. None of the staff were there. No one was. "Sylvie, Astrid," I screamed, but no one answered. I realized that I was truly alone. No one was there. I walked back through the maze of corridors and came up to the wall of windows. I walked outside to the edge of the terrace. I thought about jumping and wanted to ensure that if I did throw myself off, I wouldn't land on someone's balcony. I refused to live in a world without Christopher or my mother. As much of a mama's boy that made me sound like, losing the two people that I loved the most in the world was too much to handle. I placed my hands on the railing and leaned over. The building was a high-rise in Toronto, and I should have seen thousands of cars and people going about their regular lives, unaware of the insane happenings transpiring above them. But there was nothing. If my eyes could bulge out of my head, they certainly would at that point. There were no other people. No one. I looked into the glass facades of the buildings that surrounded me, and there was no one. There were living rooms with empty sofas, beds that were unmade with no one occupying them, and parking lots that were completely empty. There was no one. What kind of limitless power did this thing have? Could I even kill myself? I had no one left in the world that cared about me. There was nothing but the desolation of an empty soul to confront. I refused to go on. It had been less than 2 days, and my life had been ripped away from me. If you live in a war zone, you cling to your home, your pictures, your loved ones, your affectations. You cling to a cause. I had no causes left. I propped myself up onto the ledge and sat on the balustrade that ran the entire length of the terrace. My feet dangled over. I kicked off one of shoes to make sure that it would fall, and it tumbled effortlessly to the ground. I had lost my mind and had no way of regaining it. If this thing could strip away everything I loved just by opening a suitcase, what was worth fighting for? You may want to take a look inside the suitcase before you decide to do that. It was Christopher's voice. I knew it was the creature, but hearing that voice made me turn around. I hoped beyond all possibility and all reality that when I turned around, my man would be standing there. I slowly turned my head, and there he was, 20 feet behind me, the creature covered in the black, oozing blood. I stared at him over my shoulder, my feet still hanging off the terrace. "What do you want?" I said in a tone just above a whisper. There was no strength left to scream. The creature advanced towards me and said in that beautiful voice, "We want to settle your debts. We brought you back before, and if you think that this can be evened out by simply jumping, you're far less intelligent than the degrees we allowed you to have would insinuate." I chuckled almost silently. Allowed me to have? He was right. Everything I had earned and everything that I had accomplished, and even everything I had failed at, was simply at the behest of this creature and his kind. Me. What are you? How can you do this? Are you a devil? The creature quietly chuckled and advanced even closer to me. I wasn't filled with dread anymore, just an overwhelming sense of resignation. The creature spoke. "We are what you humans refer to as fate. We are the hand that guides. We are the power that makes it be. Your world and ours overlap one another, like water on a pane of glass. You see right through us, and when the time is right, just when the time is right, we even out the score. We are charged by the universe with the ultimate responsibility of ensuring that an equality is struck, that no one, man, woman, beast, is endowed with the ability to achieve more than they are capable of. When you see father rip off a door to save his child from a burning vehicle, we have allowed that to occur. And in the same vein, when an infant dies from cancer, we are the ones that take that life. When you walk across that stage holding that Nobel Prize, we are the ones that have allowed your research to succeed. And in the same vein, when a nuclear missile strikes a city and wipes thousands off the face of the earth in a blink of an eye, we are the force that allows the trigger to activate. I had so many questions. I swung around and sat facing the condo, feet now hanging safely over the terrace floor. Who is we? The creature smiled Chris's smile, but without the lips that I so longed to feel again. There are many of us, however, we operate as one. We do not see the need for division, since efficiency is our tool of choice. We tend to appear in a pleasing form, your father to your mother, your Christopher to you, Doctor, Megan to your Christopher. Our only tell is that when we leave our world and enter yours, our intentions are laid bare. I was on the verge of understanding. What do you mean your intentions are laid bare? Is it the smell? The creature continued. Yes, it is the smell. What you smell is not rotting flesh, though it may appear as such when tested by your human science. We have no need for flesh, but the stench of rotting possibilities. The smell of overwhelming poverty that your parents should have been subjected to. The acrid odor of a life wasted consuming drugs, and the overpowering fragrance of every failure you had ever encountered and undertaken. Christopher smells your death. You smell your wasted life. Your mother smells poverty. The woman at the hotel, I presumed he was referring to the clerk, smells the stench of an affair she wished she never had. Anthony smells the stench of a hit and run that was never reported. The small child in the Tim Hortons wasn't repelled by the creature's smell because she was too young to know the stench of failure, the pungent scent of unfair advantage. She instead focused on his grotesque lip. It was making sense. Then why does your lip bleed? It was the only thing about the creature's physical appearance that remained a mystery. Because we pay a price too. Nothing in existence goes unchecked, and until we remove the imbalances that we are charged to rectify, until we collect all debts, until we ensure payment of all dues, we suffer the consequences of inequality as well. We rot and fester until the ledger is made balanced, until a fine, delicate, even measure is struck. Why can't you write like us? I had to know. We do not write. We manipulate the fabric of your world to generate the notes and the messages that we send. It allows us to remind you of the unevenness, of the urge to rectify without having to visit you. Everyone owes a debt, not only you. I couldn't help but lock eyes with him through this entire period. He was explaining himself, and apparently all I needed to do was ask. A physicist's worst nightmare is not asking a question when it is required, and I had confronted that fear head-on. But you, or your kind, or whatever the right phrase would be, made the deal with my father. You made the deal with Christopher for my life. How can you claim to be some great force that brings equality when you yourselves brought about the unbalance in the first place? This was the first time that I spoke to the creature with anger. Never overestimate your worth, even if you are tempted by fate. Never take a deal without understanding that you do not deserve an advantage, and not just you. Everyone. The creature rattled this off as if he had been asked it many times before. So how do I even the balance? How do I equate the ledger? I asked, no longer filled with fear, but an all-consuming need to bring finality to this situation. Everything you have must be ours. Everything you own must be given back, the creature said in Christopher's calm, soothing voice. Do I die? I asked in an almost childlike fashion. Do you wish to even the score? The creature asked. Do you often ask? I retorted. Do you wish to pay your debts? Do you wish to even the score? The creature asked again, almost in a monotonous tone this time. He could feel the finality of his mission approaching, and the balance in this situation being restored. Yes. I had no choice. This was the only answer I could give. If he could empty a city by opening a suitcase, what was left for me? Follow me, the creature commanded. I dismounted the balustrade and walked 5 feet behind the creature. We turned the corner, and there, still shining with the light of 1,000 suns, was the suitcase. He pointed at it and nodded his head. As I approached the suitcase, I realized that the light was bearable. My eyes no longer hurt, and the light consumed me instead of simply blinding me. I looked deep inside. It was like looking at a television, a display of sorts. I could see countless other debts, both collected and outstanding. Joseph P. Kennedy, JFK's father, billions overnight. Daughter died in tragic plane accident at 27. A woman who resembled Mrs. Thompson Fitch, endless wealth won in a divorce, even though she was unfaithful, cancer by 65. Terminal. A bumbling fool of a man who looked like a young version of my father watching a stock ticker bring him closer to unimaginable wealth. Anthony crying in a car after mowing down a 9-year-old while on vacation in Italy, and a million others. What is this? I asked, absolutely fascinated and mortified. It's what allows us to even the score. You give yourself to us by entering it, and we remove the debt. He calmly said, I have to get into it? There was no longer strength left to be surprised or to be distraught. If I had to give my life, give everything that I love and everything that I hold dear in order for this debt to be removed, for the world to reach a balance, and for my Christopher to go about living his life, even without me, it was what needed to happen. I would no longer have peace in my life. I would no longer have my life if I failed to comply. I set one foot inside and fell through, cigarettes and old paper. That was the only thing that I smelled. My vision was blurry but slowly cleared. I was sitting at my desk in my office at the university. I looked around and everything seemed normal. I shot out of my chair and backed up against the wall. I felt my face, my arms, my legs, my dick, everything. I touched myself everywhere I could. Was that it? All I needed to do was step foot inside of a suitcase and this debt was evened out? Or maybe I had died, and this was what the other side of existence felt like. I ran out of my office and towards the exit of the building. I bolted outside and could feel the hot July sun beating down on my face. I looked at my watch and saw that it was 11:30 a.m., July 31st, 2014. I kept running as fast as I could, losing my breath but still pushing myself. I had to see my family, I had to see my mom, I had to see my Christopher. I darted to my car and hit the auto-open button. The beep-beep that it made when the automatic starter unlocked the locks stopped me. The creature. The last few days. It couldn't have been a dream. This is insane. What the hell happened to my life? I entered the car and took a deep breath. No smell, no stench. Maybe all of the years of doing drugs did in fact catch up to me, and this was a delayed delusion. The German-accented Siri type assistant that accepted voice commands in the car activated. "Hello, Doctor. Blockbauer, the weather today is 28 degrees. Your estimated time of travel is 30 minutes. Call Christopher," I screamed at her. "Calling Mother," she recited back. Typical, I thought. At least the inaccuracy of that interaction made me believe that this was reality. If I was dreaming, the damn thing would have worked perfectly. The phone was ringing and Sylvie's comforting voice answered. "Hello, Dr. Blockbauer. Your mother is reading on the terrace. Would you like to speak with her?" Reading this early? Oh well, who cares? She was there. She was alive. My mind stopped. Everything froze. I slammed on the brakes. Luckily, no one was behind me, or I could have caused a serious accident. "Sylvie, what did you call me?" I asked. "Dr. Blockbauer, I'm sorry. Would you prefer Peter?" She innocently responded. My wedding ring was gone. "Sylvie, where's Christopher?" I was starting to hyperventilate. I didn't know what was happening. Why was she calling me by my maiden name? Where was my ring? "I'm sorry, Dr. Blockbauer. I don't know who Christopher is." I stared blankly at the windshield. What was going on? What price did I pay? "Dr. Blockbauer? Dr. Blockbauer? Peter? Are you there?" Sylvie repeated the question, but I still didn't answer. I hung up the phone by clicking the button on the steering wheel and floored the accelerator. 204 kilometers per hour appeared on the digital readout as I tore down the highway to the house that we shared. I finally slowed down at Yonga Street and exited the highway. The light was red at the end of the ramp, and I hit the voice-activated assistant button again. "Call Christopher!" I screamed at her. "Calling Mother!" she replied in her sterile German tone. I hung up the call. I held down the home button on my iPhone, and the famous didit of Siri sounded. "Call Christopher," I said. "I don't see Christopher in your address book. Should I look for locations by that name?" Was the only thing she said. The light turned green. I tore through the streets of Toronto, laws be damned, and turned onto my street. I had to swerve to miss the 12-year-old blonde on her bicycle. As my house drew nearer, I could see that the garage door was opening. Christopher must be home. This relieved me. I made a hard right turn into the driveway and froze. There in the middle of my garage was the suitcase. Tattered, worn, but no smell. I didn't smell the creature. Nothing. I ran into the house. It was different. The decor was the same, but the pictures on the wall featured me and my friends doing things that I did not remember at all. Me with Sonia at a fashion show. Myself with Bing running the Boston Marathon, Samantha and I having lunch in Paris. But that was it. No pictures of Christopher and I. Nothing. I started to pant, to gasp. I was losing my mind. No, not again. Please, not again. I didn't want to go through this again. I thought it was finished. I ran into the garage and the suitcase was gone. I ran back into the house, unbelievably hoping to see the creature to ask what was going on. But nothing. I ran up to the bedroom that we had shared. Only my clothing was in the closet. Nothing of Christopher's was there. Christopher wasn't there. Christopher hadn't been there. Ever. Where both our degrees hung, only hung my string of degrees, set in the middle instead of at the top of the wall. No room for his. I ran into the living room and pulled what should have been our wedding album off the shelf. Instead of the cream-colored leather front, it was red plastic. The Seychelles, the potential adoption, the trips to Venice, the love, the fucking love. What did I do? I flipped open the album. Again, just pictures of me and my friends, pictures of me and men I didn't recognize. Pictures of me kissing the occasional man, and more pictures of my friends. Nothing of Christopher. I flipped to the last page, only one word. I dropped the album and collapsed, weeping on the ground. Collected. There is no way to pace this story, because my recollection of the event is like any other truly violent one, chaotic and instantaneous. None of life's tragic moments are long build-ups to skillfully told releases. They are disorientatingly fleeting, only properly understood with hindsight. But I think the retelling is important, if only to remember what happened. I am an electrician with an engineering degree. My father had a passion for boats, and so, naturally, I spent some time in the Navy. Although I learned much, it is only important insofar as telling you that I was very qualified for my job. I worked on a cargo ship. That work was a very lonely existence. Hard to keep on to people when you are offshore for long stretches of time, especially women. I had a high school sweetheart, and I spent time dating after we broke up. But no one could stomach my profession and having me in exile so consistently. So I make do with my own company. Sure, when you are at sea, you make friends for life. No way you can under those circumstances. The thing is just that most of these friends for life you won't ever see again. Everyone takes jobs when they can, and that means spending a lot of time on the same ship with different men. The men with families plan their schedules around those families, staying true to what's important to them, and therefore often fly home when we port. It is different when you are a single man. Work can become an escape from your life. It can keep your mind off the things you really need, keep you from improving, from finding solutions, making changes. It can occupy your mind even if that mind hungers desperately for change, seeking anything but that horrible, doomed loneliness at sea. Still, the work makes you stay. It takes away the energy you need to wonder and find better things. The work that consumed my time on the waters was relatively simple. I did maintenance, specifically for the stuff that had to work. Lights, sensors, engine control, and so on. Anything where you would think an electrical signal resulted in the mechanical change of a system. I was the man you talked to. That made days simple. I had one tool that was always with me, a voltmeter. Wondering if current is passing through this wire. Simple as connecting to it and you will know. Making my rounds around the ship this way, checking this and that, I was constantly running into the entire crew. We all knew each other well after no time at all, but from the perspective of others I get why I was always greeted with surprise. I knew where they were stationed, but they knew little of my rounds or didn't care to. "Hey Jim, finding it hard to stay away from me?" It was Mark. Basically the only part of the crew I knew from earlier. He was such a lovely man, kind-hearted, helpful, understanding, and full of playful humor. Of course, you're magnetic. I held up my voltmeter like it was dragging me to him. He gave out a small snicker. "What's wrong with our ship today?" No one liked Justin, not sure why. Maybe it was because he forced himself into stuff people weren't interested in sharing with him. Or maybe it was just me, and I despised the fact he didn't understand I wasn't interested in having mine and Mark's friendly jester bouts interposed with generic small talk. I had a fleeting thought occur to me then, of replying, "You are the problem with our ship," but kept it to myself. As usual, it's just loose signals that are being tightened up. But you should be glad I'm not letting anyone in on how shitty our sonar is. All ships have a sonar that helps measure the depth to the seafloor. It isn't really useful when you're at the middle of the ocean like we were at this time, but it can be extraordinarily important when close to shore. And if you're like most normal people, you probably haven't thought about how a sound-based system knows what is underneath you and what is at the sides of you. After all, it is a wave that just propagates out to all sides. So how would you know what the echo was bounced off? The reason why it works is answered by how it sounds. Multiple wavelengths of sound are emitted at once. The waves flow over each other, creating interference. The image is then created by how these waves have changed when they come back. The waves spread out in 3D, and when the sound is bounced of an object, all of the components with different wavelengths are shifted in relation to each other. Where there once was negative interference, there is now positive, and maybe vice versa, allowing you with some math to know what direction the return signal is coming from. Interference like this is crazy complicated. When interference is between two waves in head-on collision, it is relatively easy to understand. But when waves can spread between each other in 3 dimensions, or even 2-dimensional surfaces like an ocean, it immediately becomes very hard to grasp how they interact. But this complicated interaction is why sonar works, and simultaneously why ours wasn't always able to. Because in some cases, different wavelengths interact in such an unfortunate manner as to create spots of hyper-enlarged magnitudes. Basically, a single spot can be placed in a location where all waves peak together, right at that same intersection spot, creating a wave of such intensity that it can fry the system simply by being literal hundreds of times bigger than the equipment was ever designed to withstand. A rogue wave, as it is called, and it just so happens that our sonar has a tendency to create such waves much more frequently than you would expect. Let me guess, it's so bad as to basically be like going in blind. I didn't answer Justin this time, just looked at Mark as I went by them on to the next task. Don't have too much fun without me now. I didn't pity Mark having to stay with Justin. That evening we were all called in to eat together, which was a rare event. The captain chose to give us some bad news in a nice setting. Not that the room was nice, just that company was. Imagine a ship and you will know what it looked like. Cramped iron walls spray-painted with a thick layer of whitish paint, fluorescent lights, tables mounted to the floor. The feeling was like you had chosen to live with 15 other men in a floating prison. What a brutal profusion. Okay, so we are about a couple of days, a day or two out from really bad winds. We all knew what that meant, even if his look hadn't been so stern. Our captain was a man with many, many years of expertise. That he even called a meeting meant this was critical information. And getting a wind warning out on sea didn't mean strong winds. It meant waves. And of course that means dangerous waters. The weight of his words draped over us like a duvet. Just like any slumber party, anything outside of it became a distant reality. I broke the silence. How tall are we expecting them? The captain turned his eyes to meet mine. The important thing is that we prepare for it. That's the only focus at this point. Everybody on board with that assessment? He turned his gaze towards the room. He didn't know the answer, which was frightening. Sounds good, Cap, a few of the men said uncoordinatedly, allowing his desperate plea to let his ignorance slip under the rug. That night I dreamt terrible things. I dreamt that all of us was in the lifeboat. The ship slowly taking on water, we had managed to make an escape, but the lifeboat wouldn't unlatch. With such a technical fault, I dreamt of the men arguing, to some degree violently. They were choosing a crew member to unlatch it from the outside, staying back with the cargo on the doomed vessel. And logically, at least to my dreaming mind, they chose me. I was the only one that knew how to operate the latching mechanism. And being forced to step out from the security of the lifeboat, I watched Mark fight back against the group consensus. Landing backwards on the tow metal of the cargo ship, I watched the men that threw me give way to an enormous version of Mark's head filling the entire doorway with his big, teary eyes. As the ship started listing, I got to my feet, a new directive being installed into my being. Survival was no longer an option. Only the ability to save my tribe remained. Saving Mark. Dreams are weird conglomerations of ideas. And I don't know if we hugged, but we definitely exchanged a deep-felt goodbye. And I grabbed the small pin, keeping me from ridding the boats of shackles. Pushing it of the ship, I watched as I was ripped from existence by my own heroism. You slept okay, Jim? Mark handed me a much-needed coffee. Even if I had slept well, I wouldn't have been able to make coffee in this sea. Contrary to common belief, a ship doesn't sway every which way. The ship is most well-equipped going straight onto the waves. The captain going in head onto the waves meant you could be pretty sure what ways you would be thrown. Although the sea wasn't bad enough to throw us yet, but you could feel the winds the captain had promised, had worse in store for us when we reached them. I accepted the coffee graciously. Thank you. A small smile towards him was unwillingly given off my lips. Well, I actually slept quite poorly. I directed my following inquiry to the entire room. Does anyone here know how to keep the lifeboat clamps engaged? The question was vague. I designed it that way, such that it would only get a reply from someone I could trust with the task. Yes, sure, why? Anything wrong with the controls? This was my guy, a man named Joshua. No, not necessarily. I just haven't gotten around to check the circuitry is all. I need a hand with keeping the boat on tight whilst I'm in there. You have time? Mark let off a smirk. He muttered whilst bringing back my attention to him. Sure, holla when you need me. After Joshua's affirmation, I returned to Mark with a disapproving look. Grab a jacket, Joshua. It's getting cramped in here. Mark's smirk disappeared. Making our way outside wasn't as bad as I had expected, yet not easy. The waves at this point being no more than an omen of the storm to come. Only the swinging oceanic vibrations manifesting in the waves we now felt had been able to travel far enough to reach us. The problem was that the seemingly random intervals between the waves made it hard to discern a pattern to the swaying they created. When walking, you ended up having little indication of when they would hit, and looking out over the water, the only regularity I could discern to their motion was their direction. The lifeboat hung at a 45-degree angle of the side of the ship. It was orange, and it was very awkward to get into. I stepped up next to it with Joshua. "Know what to do?" "Yes, sir," Joshua answered sarcastically. I waited for another response. He didn't get the hint. "Yes, sir," he repeated, now with obedience. "And what are you doing?" He had a look of embarrassment on his face as he understood what I had meant all along. "I'll be standing here holding on to the release, stopping the pin from disengaging." I nodded. "Great, thank you, Joshua." With our roles defined, I moved into the small canister. Taking a hand to the top of the door, I put my foot onto the sloped floor. What a terrible design choice this was. Ducking into it, I used one hand to grab seats on the way down to the control panel, the other hand tightly gripping my trusty voltmeter. Each step into the maw of it, my movement became more and more fluid, whilst my anxiety in turn grew worse and worse. As I came closer to its control panel, I could see more and more ocean through the tiny enforced windows. The waves were scattered across the ocean. Like an ill-commanded army, their power was laughable. Given proper coordination, they would have been capable of much greater feats than putting us off balance. I sat myself in the captain's chair of the small tin. "Joshua, you there?" I spoke with more nervousness than I thought I would. I wasn't afraid of falling into the water. I was afraid the boat would fall into the water. Sure, I could get back on the ship. But the boat. Our only safety would be lost forever. "Yes, I'm here, holding the release pin. You are clear." I popped the control panel. I looked for the wire that connected to the release button. It was in a cluster of wires that went to the door. This system had plenty of redundancy, which was good and unexpected, honestly. Looks like my nightmare was unsubstantiated. But not checking the signal now would be silly. I placed my voltmeter on my lap and removed one of the measuring clamps. Slowly, I extended my hand and put the clamp to just one of the release wires. Once in place, I retracted my hand and went for the next clamp on the device. Reaching forward, I put the other clamp on the same wire, completing the circuit. "Pressing release," I warned Joshua. "You are clear," Joshua replied. I pressed the button. It lit up green. My voltmeter spiked. The mechanism worked. The lifeboat remained attached. Relief. "Okay, yeah, I felt it kick. That's a kick. It works all right." The powerful joy in his last affirmation was exactly what I needed. "Perfect. Thank you, Joshua. I'm packing up in here. You can relax again." Leaning down, I went to take away one of the clamps, but Joshua interrupted me. "Oh my God, Jim. I looked out the small window in front of me. The ocean was full of smaller yet dangerous waves traveling incoherently. But a pattern had emerged from their movement, and one peak had formed to such enormous mass that it began towering over the ship. A rogue wave had formed, and we were going to be hit. I went into shock. Everything slowed down, watching that wave grow. Every gut-wrenching moment vividly detailed. First was the rain. The wind blew of the water from the top of the skyscraper wave and showered the ship in heavy downpour. This is when I remember the horn sounding, a useless attempt at a warning. The next I remember was feeling our enormous cargo ship being lifted out of the water with a dizzying speed and ease. The rogue wave rolling us over. I felt my body being accelerated by gravity with my back first into the seat, a direction I hadn't expected gravity to pull. Looking back towards Joshua, I hoped he had made it into the lifeboat with me, only to see him being swept of his feet, plummeting toward a background of blue that I couldn't determine if was ocean or sky. Being snapped out of my catatonic state, I hammered my hand into the release button on the console. Then was the impact. First, I heard the sound of waves impact the cargo ship. It sounded like someone had pitch shifted the crumbling of an aluminum can. The sheer brutality of the sound, a dire reminder of the frailty of steel. Then the lifeboat was sent to the heavens. This boat, which was designed to plummet into waters from great heights, was dented by the force. I dare not imagine what had happened if the wave had collided with it in any other manner than head-on. I was thrown out of my seat and only barely saved my head from colliding with the inside of the lifeboat by sacrificing an arm, the wrist of which was pulverized, the halfway point of the arm having bones rushing out the skin in feeble attempt to escape the rest of the wave's massacre. Landing on the floor, I felt the lifeboat accelerate upwards. Emerging from the water's eye in it was sent airborne again. When it hit the water, I came crashing to a halt on the floor. Abusing the adrenaline to ignore the pain, I scurried to get on my feet. I looked out the window for any signs of life. By some miracle, I found it. A tiny speck of man was in the waters not that far from me. It was Joshua, but the wave had already claimed him. The impact of the water had mauled him worse than a big rig ever could. There was blood all around him, and I could only see one of his arms flailing in an attempt to help himself afloat. His movements looked like the spasms executed by a mechanical doll, pre-programmed and soulless. If he wasn't already following the light, the only humane thing was to let him. The ship was gone. Only white foam on water and shifting waves remained on the sea, and as if someone had put the water underneath the vessel to a boil, the ocean bubbled with the air from the ship, which was now rushing to the surface. The sheer volume of air, the enormous exhalation from the cavities of the sinking iron lung that I had called home, and that now others would find their grave. The thought that this air meant that Mark could be trapped in there, still being in panic and falsely clinging onto hope deep beneath the ocean. The thought filled me with terror. I was watching a scene of complete erasure. No evidence left behind of the carnage that had taken so much from so many, and as a devilish answer to my newfound despair, evidence was brought back from the deep. Crates of cargo started erupting up from the water. Like floats that had been submerged, their buoyancy lifted the crates so violently that they became airborne. Careening out of the water, soaring into the skies, their re-entry into the waters defaced them to liken accordions by the force of it. As much as I could have risked searching for survivors, seeing 20-foot crates, tons of steel shot from the ocean only to come hailing down again, I had to get away. Stumbling to my feet, I used my good arm to hoist me up on my feet. The waves were much harder to ignore now that the lifeboat itself was in the waters. What before had seemed like inconsequential currents of water now rooked me violently back and forth. It wasn't any longer a courtesy to hold on to the rose chairs, as I once again walked down towards the control panel. This time my other hand clutching only blood, air, and my will to survive. Reaching the control panel, I used my good arm to do everything. And with the motor coming to life, the lifeboat was inches from being hit by a crate shooting out of the waters. I gave her all she could muster, desperate to get away from here. But knowing fully well I was at the mercy of whatever direction that crate would come back down. It ended up slamming into the water on the other side of the boat. The crash against the water, an ear-deafening explosion, followed by the anguished cry of thick metal walls being bent out of shape. It had been filled with stuffed animals. Their inerts now flew out of the compressed crates, perforated sides, and covered my small windows in fluff and teddy bear gore. I was sailing blind, only guided by the sounds of doom. Sounds that only way to slowly shifted from around me, to besides me, and finally to behind me. I had escaped. Days later, I was picked up as the only survivor. Many ships go down like this every year. Rogue waves are not a myth. They do happen, and you just have to pray that it won't be close to you. The captain avoided me for most of the journey. I spotted him only once in port as he walked into the pilot room. He was a squat man with a bushy beard, a pinched face, and a nose that reminded me of a goldfinch beak. I called out to him to ingratiate myself, but he ignored me and went about his work. I was told he liked to keep to himself, but I assumed that since the company had paid for my passage, he would eventually avail himself to me. We were on our third night on the river, and I hadn't seen the hide or hair of the man. I started to think that the pilot room wasn't just where he controlled the steamer, but also his nest. The Big Easy River Company had hired me to write about their new 4-day trip up the Mississippi River. It was a test run, and I'd have the whole place to myself. The accommodations were passable, but not spectacular. The previous month, I had been aboard one of the newer luxury ocean liners, and the rooms on that ship were busting at the seams with extravagant touches. This steamer had only given me a mint on my pillow. Regardless, the trip was not my first concern. The company paid me good money for the story, and the extra bonus they provided when I arrived ensured the coverage would be positive. The Big Easy River Company had once been the class of the river, but had fallen behind competitors offering quicker trips at lower prices. Not to mention the growing ocean liner business that sailed into the port of New Orleans and promised locales more exotic than Kansas or Missouri. The ride along the Mississippi was smooth, but the constant thwack of the paddle hitting the water and the steam engine clattering did not allow for the most restful sleep on the ship, especially if you were near the big wheel itself. Thankfully, I wasn't, but that last night I found myself growing restless. I became convinced that the captain had to have stories to tell. I found it queer that, despite the dire straits the company found itself in, he refused to speak to me. I was sure he would have all kinds of tales to color my story, yet he rarely left the pilot's room. Since sleep wouldn't come, I decided to walk around the ship when everything was still, see if my smooth-talking ways might get the crew to open up. Like the captain, they had avoided me like the plague. I found it odd that a struggling company wouldn't force its crew to be more hospitable, but I had already been paid. It was their choice. These crew conversations always yielded fruit. Once, while writing a story about a campsite in the Adirondacks, I had a conversation with a ranger. He told me of all the strange phenomena he'd dealt with while working there, ghosts, creatures, and things of that nature. I took some of the more gruesome details and sprinkled them into the article. My editors nearly canceled the story, but I convinced them to run it as is. It was a massive hit. Reservations at the campsite were booked up to 2 years in advance. The truth was, if a place was eerie, ghoul chasers, my preferred name for dark tourists, were always drawn to it. Knowing this, I liked to throw a bone, quite literally in the case of the skeletal remains found in High North cabins, to those readers. Ghoul chasers flocked to these places, hoping to have a paranormal encounter to impress neighbors back home. Not every client wanted to cater to the ghoul chasers, but money's money. Any complaints were dulled by the wads of greenbacks they pulled in post-publication. I hoped for something along those lines during this trip, but had rolled snake eyes so far. It was a shame because there had to be lore and legend surrounding the mighty Mississippi. It'd go a long way if someone would comment, but mum was the word. I even prompted several porters, but they kept their cards close to the vest. I assumed this edict came from the top down. This led me to believe I'd have to get stories from the captain's lips alone. As I rounded the ship's prow, I was stunned to come face to face with the captain. He was smoking a pipe and staring out into the inky blackness. Spray from the water dotted his face and belly. Droplets rolled down his body, but he didn't seem to mind. Divine intervention, I thought. Something hidden out there? I asked with a warm, soft chuckle. Aye, he said, his eyes never straying from the black. I laughed again. Should I be concerned? He didn't respond with words. He puffed on his pipe and blew out a cloud of gray smoke that mingled with the night air. You're the writer, eh? I am, I said, extending my hand. I've been hoping I'd get a chance to talk. Your crew speaks very highly of you. He didn't shake my hand. I sheepishly pulled it away. They're a good bunch. Flattery didn't get me anywhere, and I changed tactics. Been with Big Easy for long? No, he said, tapping his pipe on the railing. I came aboard a month ago. When the new owners came on board as well, correct? Aye. Where were you before? I've piloted many a boat down the river over my life. Find it rewarding work? He shrugged. I just keep rolling along. What drew you to the job? He paused and carefully chose his words. I allowed myself to believe that maybe he was opening up. I needed work after my last job ended, poorly. Oh? What happened? Who were you with before? Private owner, and I don't care to speak on it. I pulled out a cigarette and offered one to the captain. He demurred my offer but pinched fresh tobacco into his pipe. He was going to stay for a while. I offered a match and he leaned in. Was it a private shipping company? Pleasure cruise? Little of both, he said. Brought his family with him, wife and a doll baby little girl. He looked away and sighed. I told him to keep those babes at home. The wild river was no place for them, but he insisted. Same in my business, I said, taking a puff of my smoke. When the money men insist, we do it. Some men have no sense. Some men don't, I agreed. Are there a lot of smaller shipping companies along the river? Not as many as before. Big fish eat the little fish, he said. But he wasn't hauling goods for some shipping company. He was into something else. Smuggling? I asked. The man was worse than a smuggler, a damn fool adventurer, rich as Croesus, paid handsomely for the things he wanted. I was right about there being a story. This old salt had taken a big muckety-muck with cash to burn on a secret but deadly mission, a mission that may have ended tragically. The captain was not forthcoming with details but was starting to open up. I'd work him and he'd eventually give up the ghost. Before I came, I read up on the river's history. There were a lot of tales of pirates using the river to hide their ill-gotten gains. Was your man after buried treasure? Something like that. Oh, I said, taking a drag of my cigarette. Whose buried treasure was it? Blackbeard? Pegleg Pete? He stared up at the onyx sky and shook his head. Wasn't a treasure exactly, but I've said too much already. He turned to leave, and I saw the more colorful elements of my article walking away with him. I shot my arm out and caught his. He stopped and glared at me. Look, I understand you don't want to share this information, I do. But it looks like you might need to unburden yourself. Anything you tell me now, I'll keep off the record. You have my word. He paused, and I saw the wheels in his mind turning. Would you do a blood oath to that promise? It was my turn to pause. A blood oath? Aye, he said, pulling a small pocket knife out and presenting his hand. It was scared from various other blood oaths this man had taken over the years. This information needs to stay secret. Too many great men and women have met their ends because of it. I eyed the ancient knife and wondered when the blade was last cleaned. Perhaps my story was good enough as written. Just then there was a flutter in my mind, and an exciting prospect came to me. Maybe old salt stories were an untapped gold mine in the publishing world. This might be my way into that world. I'd deal with the scar if a carved-up hand transformed into money in my palm. All right, I said, and offered up my palm. In a flash, the captain sliced a scarlet slash across my skin. I clutched it with my other hand as blood seeped out through the tiny slits. Without batting an eye or wiping off the knife, he sliced his palm too. Shake on it. I did and felt our blood mingling. I shuddered. The things you do for an exclusive. Now, I said, pulling back my bloody hand. What was he looking for? Not a treasure, but a location hidden down one of the tributaries. There surely can't be unexplored places along this river. There are unexplored places all around us, he said, taking another puff. You just have to know where to look. What was at this hidden place? An old temple mound, he said. Treasures are in there? You're not understanding. There ain't any physical treasure. The treasure is the mound itself. How can an old pile of dirt be worth anything? It's a sacred place built by the first peoples that populated this land. Indians? Older, he said. I laughed. He didn't. Man didn't create this temple, and he's not welcome there. I tried to tell Mr. Chambers, but he didn't listen. That name rang a bell. Jonas Chambers, the furniture magnate, had gone missing with his family earlier this year. They never found a single hair from any of his family members. After the investigation, there had been a sensational trial between his surviving siblings about dividing up his assets. It had gotten ugly. Ultimately, the company folded. What struck me as odd was that the papers had reported that Jonas Chambers had been traveling by train and never arrived at his destination. Jonas Chambers? I asked, seeking clarification. He'd obsessed over the temple for years. I'd refused him 7 times before he finally won me over. I wish I had stayed firm in my rejection. You were there? How did you get away without any physical harm? I stayed in the steamer, he said, embarrassed. What happened? I don't rightly know, he said. I saw them as they entered the woods. I begged him to keep his wife and child on board, but rich men do whatever rich men want. About 10 minutes later, the woods went quiet, like something had instructed it to. Then there came a whipping wind that blew from the east. Trees as old as Moses snapped at the trunk. The boat nearly capsized, but I kept her steady. He paused, and in the corner of his craggy eyes, tears started to form. I reached over and touched his arm, letting him know without a single word spoken that he was in a safe place with me. He cleared his throat and continued. It went still again, but remained deathly quiet. I strained my ears to hear them walking through the trees. I heard his squeal when he found the temple mound. His wife and his babe followed suit. Pure joy in their voices, I even smiled myself. I hoped he'd turn back and not climb the mound, but why couldn't he climb the mound? That ain't man's place. He don't belong near it. What happened? The captain sighed. A bellow came bubbling from deep within the earth. Without the noise of the natural world, you could feel it rattle your bones. I clutched my ears to blot out the bedeviling noise, but it made no difference. The old ones, they can get to you however they want. A chill raced up my spine at the mention of the old ones. You hear all kinds of fantastic stories when you've dabbled in the paranormal for as long as I have. Often they're independent of one another, and most are hoaxes. In my travels, I'd heard amazing legends that all turned out to be nothing more than some lie told to hide a more horrid truth. There was the remains of a two-headed boy in Ruston, Louisiana. I went there and found 2 pig fetuses stuffed into a mason jar. Or the man who swore the world would end on April 8th. When the day came and passed, he killed himself and his family. To say nothing of the raving fool of Avery Island who was called the King of Carrot Flowers, and swore he spoke to Mother Nature herself. What I found was a ranting, malnourished mental deficient tied to a rope in a family-run freak show. But tales about the old ones cropped up nationwide. Stranger still, these stories all shared similar details. People who dealt with them all came out of the experience changed. Their ranting seemed real, more believable. Liars have a spark in their eyes that a trained journalist can spot. These people, though, that spark had gone. Those stories always played, and most importantly paid, well. Personally, I was on the fence about them. But a large contingent of my ghoul chasers were true believers. The talk of a race of people living here before man was worth exploring. They'd travel any distance and probe the areas where the ancient creatures were said to exist. Some came to find actual proof, while others went for real thrills. None came away disappointed by the hunt, though. These legends have persisted for a reason. The old ones? I asked, playing dumb to pry more from him. Eons before man dreamed of a life outside the treetops. These lands were controlled by powerful creatures born from the depths of unimaginable hell. They crossed the land, causing chaos and order in equal measure, saving some while killing others. That's who the Chambers family ran into? Aye, he said with a nod. I know it makes me sound like a loon, but I know what I saw. Have you seen things like that before? The captain turned towards me. When you've been on the water for as long as I have, he said, his eyes locking on mine, strange happenings become common. But whenever I come into contact with one of them, he trailed off. What happened after the noise? Right, he said, turning his attention back to the dark water. After the rumbling stopped, I screamed from the boat for the family. I yelled myself hoarse, but I don't think they heard a thing. Our voices are small in the grand scheme of things. Suddenly, the sky above the mound filled with thousands of glowing green and yellow lights, no larger than a button. It reminded me of the night sky out in the Atlantic. Were these fireflies or... No, he said curtly. Even if they were fireflies, no man could conjure up so many in one place on a whim. Those are the actions reserved for a god. This gave me pause again. A god? What else would you call things that can manipulate the world? The Indians of this land knew all too well that gods walk among us. What happened after the fireflies appeared? He paused again. His ruddy face was drained of all its color. Even in the moonlight, it was possible to see his complexion change. Whatever had happened had scared this man to his very core. You ever heard the sound of a person being torn in half? My stomach roiled. I had, in fact, never heard the sound of a person ripped in half. It was a noise I didn't even know existed. I hoped to avoid hearing anything close to that for the rest of my days. I softly shook my head no. The tearing, the screams, the wife, the babe. He took off his cap and ran his hand through his slick hair. After the fireflies left, all returned to normal. I wasn't sure what to do. I knew I should turn the steamer around and head for port, but something inside me told me to go to the beach. I had to check to make sure there were no survivors. I thought maybe the old ones had played with my mind. I would only be able to trust my own eyes. He pulled a pouch of loose tobacco out of his pocket, pinched some, and placed it in his pipe. His hand was shaking. I, again, provided a match. He nodded thanks before he continued. I put my foot down on the shore, and it felt like I was entering a foreign land. My whole body trembled, and I could hardly move, but some ancient desire for knowledge pushed me forward. I entered the forest and heard the noise around me cease. Did you run back? I wanted to, but then I heard the crying of the babe. A melancholic sob that pulled at my heart. I made my way towards the sobbing, but as I got deeper, the crying no longer drew me in. In fact, the crying stopped altogether. The laughter began. Was it the old one? He nodded. I don't think they wanted to harm me. I think they wanted to warn me to stay away. So I did. Why would they warn you? He shrugged. I've struggled with that question every day since. Why was I spared and the other not? His face softened and the grief shone through. The guilt of living through something when others died, I said. Over the years doing my job, I've spoken to countless people who've dealt with that too. What you're feeling, it's normal, I said, hoping to convince him to keep talking. I am engine, he said, resigned. I keep rolling on. Even engines need to refuel, Captain. He ignored me, but I pressed on. You lived because you were supposed to. Nothing more, nothing less. Just the luck of the draw. No divine intervention necessary. But there was. Aye, they let me live, but they've also cursed me. Cursed me with the knowledge of their existence. He shook his head. Now I've cursed you as well. I laughed. How have you cursed me? With knowledge, he said. I told you where they can be found. Now you'll want to go see them. I don't even know where they are. He pointed his pipe at the shore. That's where we beached, he said, staring at the banks. How can you be sure that is the exact location? I asked, dubious of this coincidence. The captain didn't share my doubts. That's how they weave their black magic. The old ones are playing tricks, man, putting us together right near where the temple mound is located. I stared out at the shore, but didn't see anything but black. I wasn't even sure there was a tributary there, but I don't have the eyes of a sailor. I can't tell the subtle differences between dark water and dark land. The first thoughts that flooded my brain were, you're absolutely correct. I have no desire to go there. But then there was a flutter in my mind. Sure, danger loomed. But if I witnessed something as incredible as the old ones, this would be the biggest story of my career. The payday would be massive. Hell, international fame might follow. They're talking to you, aren't they? The whispers, I've heard them too. I shook my head. I only hear my own thoughts. Are you sure those thoughts are yours alone? Yes, I said, but found myself doubting my answer. Were these thoughts mine? Was this thought mine? Had any of the thoughts that led me to this moment my own? Of course they were. Only I control my own destiny. At this moment, I became keenly aware that this tale was starting to sound extraordinarily like the other hoaxes I'd seen before. Was the captain messing with me? I had no proof he piloted the ship that led the Chambers family to their final destination. Wouldn't I have heard his name as the story became a national sensation? Was he playing a trick on me because he hated the press? He had avoided me the entire voyage, and it was strange he was now spilling his guts like we were old gal pals chatting about unrequited love. Was this some silly prank he devised to mess with me? The more I let the thought breathe, the more alive the idea became. Yes, he had to be messing with me. If you want, I can take you there, he said, tapping the spent tobacco out of his pipe. There was that flicker at the base of my skull again. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself. I had meant to say no, but my voice vetoed my brain. Are you sure? Yes, I said, my mouth again taking the lead. I need to see this. He nodded and exited the deck for the pilot's cabin. I stood along the railing, my mind screaming at my body to run and stop him, but my legs wouldn't dislodge from where I stood. Something had ensnared my mind. It was in control. I could watch, comment, or object, but changing course was impossible. The river's current had us now. All that was possible now was to float along and pray the river didn't lead us to a waterfall. The steamship turned, and from my spot on the prow, the hidden tributary of the river came into view. It'd be a snug fit, but the captain was a masterful pilot and guided us with little trouble. The riverboat gently nudged against the shallows and came to a stop. The woods before us sang the most fabulous symphony Mother Nature had ever conceived. It was so loud that I found my thoughts, and only my thoughts, drowned out in the noise. The thoughts of the intruder in my mind had no problem speaking with the captain, who had returned from his perch. The water is shallow here, he said, nodding towards the ship's side. That ladder will take you down. I'll wait for you. Sounds great, I cheerfully said. Was it still me? Before a thought manifested in my brain, I'd climbed the ladder and stepped into the frigid river water. It didn't slow me down, and a few steps later I was on terra firma again. Despite this being a wild spot along a wild coastline, I spied a small trail laid out before me. It turned into the darkness of the woods, and I believed it'd lead me to the forbidden temple mound. I was internally screaming at the slumbering part of my brain to wake up and turn back, but nothing I did stopped it. My body moved towards the trail, towards the darkness, towards the old ones. It's a pilgrimage to the holiest of the holies, the captain yelled from the deck. You're home, stranger. Rejoice in the glory of your gods. Praise be, I hollered back as I walked into the foliage and lost sight of the shore. I strode down the well-worn dirt path. My feet slapped against the mud with each footfall, making me slide a bit. The noise around me now was deafening. I understood that nothing inside these woods feared man, which meant one of two things. They didn't know about man and thus weren't afraid of his arrival, or that there was something much worse than man in these woods. I prayed for option A, but feared it was B. I stepped along the path and my foot hit something I wasn't expecting, a stone pathway. The noises around me vanished as soon as my shoe's sole hit the rock. I had triggered something. It was just as the captain had told me. The winds would be next. The gale force arrived, sending me flying through the air until I slammed against the side of an ancient oak with a crack. A heavy branch above me splintered and came screaming toward the ground. Though dazed, I managed to roll out of the way as the branch crashed into the ground with a sickening thud. It would have crushed me to goop. As I rolled for my life, my head bashed into a rock on the ground, sending painful bursts of color into my vision. Pain racked my entire body. The gaping wound on my forehead trickled blood down my face. I was miserable, but the jolt to my head had broken the spell. My entire mind was mine again. My first thought was my best. Move or you'll die. I stood, my legs wobbly under me, and made off for the river again. As I went crashing through the brush, new wounds opened on my face and exposed arms, but I kept moving. As soon as I broke through the brush and came face to face with the steamship, the crack of a revolver broke through the night sky. A bullet whizzed past my body. The captain had fired the shot. "You must go to the temple mound. The old ones demand it. I am your engine, lords. I keep rolling on." He pointed his gun and squeezed off another shot. I dove away, the bullet just missing my body, and landed face first on the muddy riverbank. I pulled myself up instantly and headed back into the cover of the bushes. Another shot rang out, but it was behind me and embedded into a tree. As it did, the branches above me screamed in pain. A chilling horror crept in. Was this whole area the body of an old one? Suddenly the ground shook and a deep bass flowed from my feet to my head. I covered my ears but felt the bone-rattling noise in my organs. After the sounds crescendo, I heard the captain cheering and dancing on the deck. "They've arrived!" Above me, thousands of green and yellow lights emerged from the darkness. I was a trapped animal, an angry awakening deity behind me, and a raving lunatic with a pistol in front of me. Like all pilgrims, my salvation required a baptism. I'd have to dive into the mighty Mississippi and swim for it. I dove into the water and the cold stunned my limbs. I pushed past the pain and swam away from the shore as fast as my arms would take me. I heard bullets hit the water, but they were well behind me. As soon as I was out of the tributary, I felt the river's pull strengthen and drag me along. A downed log floated past me and I hooked an arm around it. I held on for dear life for miles until I beached hours later. I hid among the brush and shivered until daybreak. I awaited death, but he did not show, nor did the steamship or the crazed captain that manned it. Hours later, when it was safe, I caught the attention of a passing barge that graciously ferried me back to New Orleans. Once in the city, I marched to the Big Easy River Company office, ready to tear into the struggling owners. But when I arrived at my destination, my anger had chilled to fear. The building was empty. The office where I had picked up my ticket and interviewed the owners wasn't just vacant, but dilapidated like it hadn't been occupied for years. I asked around about the company, and the locals assumed I had just come staggering off Bourbon Street. A sickening truth grabbed me. The Big Easy River Company never existed. Now I am on Bourbon Street trying to reconcile what I went through. I know the company offered me a ticket for an article. I know that I went into that office. I know that I was on the steamship. I know I met the captain, but I also know I wasn't in control of my brain for those fleeting moments on that shoreline. My own body. The old ones had been, using the captain and myself to bring either sacrifices or converts to their ancient ways. A thought came to me in that moment. I am an engine, and I'm rolling on. There was that pleasing flicker at the base of my skull again. I smiled. I should publish this article. It would bring the ghoul chasers in droves. Maybe the Big Easy River Company will be up and running then. After all, the old ones need help. Who am I to turn a blind eye to their pleas? For I am an engine, and I'm rolling on. Ella moved into the old house at the edge of town, the one that everyone warned her about. It was cheap, charming, and had a certain loneliness that matched the emptiness in her heart after her recent divorce. She didn't mind the creaking floors or the drafts that whispered through the cracks in the windows. It was hers now, a fresh start. But from the first night, something was wrong. At first it was subtle, just the occasional creak or groan of the old house settling. Then, around midnight, she started hearing whispers, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from deep within the walls. She chalked it up to her imagination. After all, old houses made strange noises, right? But they didn't stop. Every night the whispers grew louder. First they sounded like distant voices, barely audible, as if they were speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Then they began to take on more shape, clearer words she knew. Ella. Her name echoed from the walls, soft but unmistakable. Ella, come closer. The voice was calm, seductive, coaxing her to the hallway. At first she resisted, locking herself in her bedroom, convinced she was just hearing things. But the whispers didn't stop. They came at odd hours, and though they never seemed to belong to anyone, there was a sick familiarity to them, like someone was trying to draw her in. One night, unable to sleep, she finally gathered the courage to investigate. With a flashlight in hand, she walked cautiously down the narrow hallway, the wooden floor creaking beneath her feet. The whispers grew louder as she neared the wall in the living room, the place where they always seemed to come from. She pressed her ear against the cold, splintered wood, and the voices immediately grew frantic. Come closer, Ella. Don't be afraid. We're waiting for you. Her heart raced, but she couldn't move. Something compelled her to press harder, to listen more intently. The walls felt alive, like they were breathing. Then with a sudden, jarring crack, a voice, deep, guttural, like it was coming from the very bones of the house, spoke clearly. We've been waiting for so long, Ella. The wall in front of her shuddered, a faint ripple running across the surface as if something inside was pressing against it. Her breath caught in her throat and she staggered back, but the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they became louder, faster, more desperate. The floor beneath her feet seemed to vibrate with the energy of the voices, until the walls began to move. The plaster split with a sharp crack, and from within the wall something crawled out. Thin, pale arms covered in deep scars reached through the cracks in the plaster and gripped the edges, pulling something else through, something twisted, deformed. Its face was a blur of smeared flesh, its eyes wide and unblinking, as though it had been waiting for her, starving for her. She screamed, stumbling back, but the thing was already halfway out, its grotesque fingers digging into the floor, dragging its body after it. We're here for you, Ella, it rasped, its voice a sickening blend of dozens of others. You've always known. We've always been waiting. Ella backed away, but the house seemed to close in around her, the walls contracting, the whispers now screaming her name. Ella, Ella, Ella! With a final horrified scream, she turned and ran. But no matter how far she went, no matter how fast, the whispers followed. They were always there. In the walls, in the floor, in the air, she breathed. And she knew, in that last terrible moment, as her legs gave out and the darkness took her, that the thing she had heard all along wasn't trying to warn her, it was waiting, and now it had her. Kaylee has been my best friend for as long as I can remember. For me, that's not a figure of speech. I literally can't remember how I met her. I can't find any photos of me with her before 3rd grade, so I guess I met her around then. Strangely, though, she's not in any of my class photos. I remember her coming over my house all the time, but I don't ever remember going to hers. These things never struck me as weird until a few days ago, when I really sat down and thought about them. Some things in life you just sort of accept as fact, right? They've gone on so long you don't remember how they started. Like how I always put eggs on the top shelf of the fridge, or how I always tuck my blanket under my feet before going to bed. I don't remember how it started. I've just always done it that way, as long as I can remember. So how did I meet her? I don't remember. They say if you lose your sight, you don't see pitch black or nothingness or a void. You just have the absence of sight. That's how it is for me with Kaylee. There's no remnant of a memory, nothing on the tip of my tongue. It just isn't there. A few days ago I asked her about it. Do you remember how we met? What do you mean? She asked, her smile faltering. Well, we met when I was around 8, right? But you went to a different school. So how did we meet? It was at that summer camp, wasn't it? She asked. With the bottle rockets? I don't think so. I'd only gone one summer, and I was pretty sure that was the summer after 4th grade. Church, then? Which church? Kaylee paused. The one off Main Street with the steeple. Which one? Oh, I'm not sure. You know I'm not religious, she said with a laugh. The one on the corner or on Elm Street? She paused. Elm, I think. Well, my parents took me to St. Paul's on the corner, I said. So it couldn't have been church. Huh, she said, shrugging. Then I don't know how we met. It was weird. She seemed confused, and yet, it almost felt like she was playing the role of a fortune teller, throwing out vague answers and hoping I'd jump in with more details. So you don't remember how we met? I said with finality. I guess I don't. She shook her head, her bleach blonde hair shaking around her face. Isn't that silly? We've been best friends for 10 years, and we can't even remember how we met. I wanted to ask her more, but then my roommate got home, and my roommate is a bit persnickety, so we decided to quietly watch a movie in my room to give her some peace. It seemed weird to bring up again. I was probably overthinking things. That night, however, I couldn't sleep. As Kaylee slept peacefully on the futon in the common area, I lay wide awake in my bed. Why can't I remember? And then a thought occurred to me. Someone else must remember. I went on Facebook and clicked over to our 21 mutual friends. I started scrolling, making a mental list of who was most likely to know. But then a sudden realization hit me. Each of these friends, I'd introduced to her. None of these were her friends originally, they were all mine. I squinted at the screen. How does that make sense? Has she really never introduced me to her friends? And now that I thought about it, she was always visiting me at my dorm, making the 2-hour drive. She offered because I was broke and couldn't afford the gas. But maybe there was more to it than that. Why had I never thought about this before? I scrolled back through my Facebook photos to some childhood photos I'd posted. Kaylee was in them, sure as day. She looked different. Her hair wasn't bleached then, her face was chubbier. But from the dimples to the sharp chin, it was her. I clicked back on her Facebook page and scrolled. And that's when I realized something. Every single post involved me or one of our 21 mutual friends. I didn't see a single tag by someone I didn't know. Well, that could be the privacy settings, couldn't it? Like her friends who've tagged her have made the post only visible to their friends or mutuals or something. But not a single post? It was like her entire life revolved around me. Like every single event in her life was related to me, directly or indirectly. I gave up on sleep. I got out of bed and walked into the common room, grabbing a Coke from the mini fridge. Kaylee was sleeping soundly on the futon. I glanced over at her, my heart pounding. Her pale skin was blue in the light from the microwave clock. Muffled music came from my roommate's room. She was still up. With my mind racing and no one else to talk to, I went over. Can I come in for a second? I called quietly through the door. As soon as she opened it, I darted inside. There's something weird about Kaylee, Isabel scoffed. Yeah, duh. What? She's weird, always has been. You just noticing this now? I frowned at her. Okay, sorry, that came out really mean, but it's true, she's just weird. I wish she wouldn't come over every weekend, but since you're really good about Ben coming over, I never say anything. She doesn't come over every weekend, I huffed. It's been a lot. I mean, she was here homecoming weekend, then those 2 weekends in October, then Halloween. She wasn't here Halloween, I protested. Oh, yes, she was, Isabel replied. Ben and I had to go over to his place because she was here with you. I shook my head. Number. She wasn't here Halloween. We stared at each other. Isabel's irritation melted to confusion. She wasn't here. I had COVID, remember? But I saw her. When we came back from the Beta Theta Pi party, she was here. We had to go to Ben's place. The room started to tilt around me. I remember being so sick that weekend, in and out of sleep half the day. But she was here without me knowing. You must have gotten the weekends confused, I said weakly. No, I remember it clearly because we were both in our costumes. Do you know how itchy that Harley Quinn wig is? Kaylee must have let herself in, but why? Now that I thought about it, that weekend, there had been some weird stuff. I'd chalked it up to delirium at the time, but I remember not being able to find my phone. My milk was missing from the fridge. I thought it had been Isabel or Ben, but it had been Kaylee. She was here. Watching me sleep. What the fuck? I was jolted out of my thoughts by a thump outside, coming from the common room. Kaylee, I whispered. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, started down the hall. My door creaked open. She's looking for me. I ran over to the door and locked it. I held a finger to my lips, standing absolutely still, so still I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. The footsteps started back up into the common room, and then towards our door, getting louder. Isabel glanced down and her eyes went wide. "She's right there," Isabel mouthed to me. The footsteps stopped. The door handle made a ratcheting sound as Kaylee tried to turn it. Once, twice, 3 times. "Haley, are you in there?" I held my breath. "Isabel?" I closed my eyes. She'll just go away. She'll think Isabel's asleep and I just stepped out. Isabel's computer is on, but it's dark in here, so we're fine. I took in a slow, quiet breath. We're fine, she's just going to go back to sleep. 1, 2, 3, 4. "I know you're in there." A raspy whisper, unlike anything I'd heard Kaylee say, and it was coming from the crack under the door. I could feel her breath against my ankles. Isabel clapped a hand over her mouth. I took a shaking step away from the door. "Let me in," she whispered. Her slim, pale fingers shot through the crack under the door and swept back and forth quickly, frantically, trying to grab any part of us she could. "Let me in now." Isabel grabbed her phone off the desk and dialed 911. The fingers retracted and footsteps sounded in the common room. By the time the police got here, Kaylee was gone. It's been 2 days and I haven't heard from Kaylee. I think about her every waking minute. I've barely eaten or slept. I keep replaying that night through my head, wondering what she would have done if I hadn't locked the door. I've done my research, though, combed through social media and photo albums and everything. There is no physical evidence that Kaylee existed in my life before a year ago. Because those photos from my childhood? My mom insists I never had a friend named Kaylee. When she dug the old photo albums out of the attic, she wasn't in any of them. Kaylee's face only appeared in the digital scans of the photos I'd posted online. Photos I'd posted in the past year. And those 21 mutual friends, they all met her in the past year too. She'd made an effort to befriend my friends, find them online. But none of the friendships went back more than a year. I'd checked each and every one. And now suddenly I'm having trouble recalling all those memories with her. I can barely remember what she looked like. Blonde hair, pale skin, dimples. I knew that much. But if you showed me a lineup of 10 girls with those qualities, I don't think I'd be able to pick her out. Which leads me to the horrifying conclusion. If she ever finds me again, whether that's in days or years or decades, I won't even know it's her. When I was a child, I grew up in a small and relatively impoverished town in the English countryside. The place was ravaged decades ago, when the last of the mines had all been finally closed. Not being a particularly beautiful place, unlike its many neighboring coastal towns, the town would slowly and silently decay. When the mines closed in the late 70s, a man named Thomas Rowe would decide to start a shop from his front room using his handful of savings. His ever-dedicated wife, a woman by the name of Jen, quit her job as a seamstress to work the shop for him and do all the bookkeeping. The two understood it would be a difficult journey ahead of them, but they knew it was the kind of challenge that they wanted and were willing to work hard together. Over the next few hard-fought years, the two would build a successful store, fully converting the bottom floor of their home into the shop floor. Due to their willingness to lend a hand to anyone who needed it, the community around them looked after them in kind. Tom and Jen General became a bastion of the community and a seemingly permanent fixture in the town. My mom would tell me that even she and her friends called Jen Nana Jen, a name I'd known her as myself for as long as I can remember. She had a warmth about her, a soft, welcoming smile that wrapped you in an all-encompassing warmth followed by a genuine interest in your day and maybe even a free sweet if we don't tell Tom. Thomas Rowe was lovely, but he was just Tom. Only Jen was Nana Jen, and everyone loved her for that. Even after his death, the sign Tom put up all those years still hung. I must have been 9 or 10 when he passed. It was nice to see everyone come together to mourn with and take care of Nana Jen, a community that over the years had become distant and fractured, joining forces to help this woman who had taken care of them for so long. After the shop was returned to its original state as a residential home, you would often see Nana Jen wandering around town. Whether she was off to the dry cleaners or on her way to an appointment, she would always have time to stop, chat, and make sure you were doing okay. I swear to God, even after that woman started losing her keys and jewelry, She always seemed to remember everyone by name, at least until the events of our story. I was a young brown-haired idiot when I turned 14, but that's okay because my best friend Jason was just the same. Only his hair was shorter compared to my shoulder-length locks. We weren't a pair of miscreants or anything, but when you're a bored teen in the countryside, there is a certain level of mischief that is entailed. The odd prank here or there, scrumping for apples, and the odd bit of mild arson in some random field. One time when playing a game where you knock on the door and run away before they catch you, Jason was able to sneak right up behind me, and right as I knocked on the door, he kicked me on my backside. Fully flat on the floor, prone on my back. With a deep sigh, I accepted my fate when I heard a soft melody coming from the doorway. "Oh, Matthew, what's happened?" Looking up, I see the slightly concerned face of Nana Jen looking down at me quizzically. "So sorry. I fell over when on the step," I blurted out, scrambling to my feet to meet her at eye level. "You know, that little doorstep gets me too," she chucked. "So what are you doing here, dear?" "Oh, I was just coming to check in on you," I replied, unsure of how convincing my response was. "Just making sure you're doing okay, or if you need help with anything." "Well, sweetheart, it's funny you should mention because just today I lost my special necklace that Tom got me." "Well, where do you last remember having it?" came the approaching voice of Jason, who had clearly come back after I didn't come running behind him. "Hello, Jason. Well, I had it at the butcher's, but then I didn't have it by the time I got home, and I didn't stop anywhere between the two. I had a little look, but my eyes aren't what they used to be." "We're not doing anything, so we could look. It's the summer holidays, so we have the time," I explained, smiling at the ever more frail-seeming Nana Jen. "You know the necklace I'm talking about, right?" she asked. "Yeah, of course we do," I replied, and honestly we did. The necklace she was referring to was as permanent a fixture as she was. A stunning tin necklace whose tarnish didn't distract from the intricate beauty of the etching of a Celtic cross behind a large cat. I often worried about her spine due to the size of the necklace, however. She always seemed to be so used to it that it was more natural to compensate for the weight of the charm than not. With that, Jason and I had become the initial search team for Nana Jen's necklace. It wasn't long until we were able to rope others into it as we asked anyone we saw along our search path. In no time, what felt like half the town was now either actively or passively on the hunt for her pendant. Maybe it was guilt for not finding it, but Jason and I became regulars at Nana Jen's home. She always seemed happy to see us, and honestly, we both kinda enjoyed spending the time with her. We'd often do little chores for her, help her carry things around, and always be willing to taste test her wonderful pastries. Nana Jen one afternoon told us the story of her necklace. It was given to her by Sam when he received a large raise at work. All the wives of the miners here had been given one. She had loved it so much and taken care of it for so long. Jen was the last person alive who had received one, but after this many years that was to be expected. Slowly, but all of a sudden, Nana Jen started to go downhill. Little things were forgotten here or there. Less energy to do what she loved, and even her eyes had become slowly more sunken into her skull. She was aging before our very eyes, decaying, and before long it would be my family who would offer to take care of her. With all the time I had spent with her, my mom and dad had bonded with her as much as I had, so when they noticed how bad she had gotten, our home became the obvious choice to take care of her, considering her lack of remaining family. "So my bed is here?" breathed a slightly confused but ever considerate Nana Jen. "Yes, Jen. We have put a new bed with a new mattress, especially for you. We've even got a load of your stuff from your room to make it feel like home." My mom had always been a kind woman, heavily influenced by Nana Jen and her own mother. "Steph, you've been too good to me." A tear appeared in Jen's eyes as she hugged my mom, her ginger hair getting tangled in Jen's face. "You've looked after me and this family for so long, we're just happy that we have the opportunity to pay it back," reasoned Steph, who herself was now fighting back the tears. Nana Jen settled in quickly, however. It would not be long until we noticed something strange. Both my dad and I had separately heard a soft, rhythmic whispering coming from her room late at night. Upon investigation, it would seem that she was asleep both times. One night I heard her just muttering, "They need it. They need to be buried with it. With it. It's not good. Not good." These small, creepy, yet explainable instances got overshadowed by the chaotic trial of the festive season. For just the month of December, we had hired a nurse to take care of her simple needs, so we didn't have to worry. My parents could take me and my sister out for festive activities without having to worry about Jen. The nurse would be a good choice too, as we found out that this would probably be the last Christmas for our great Aunt Sophie. So from Christmas to New Year, we would be staying with her immediate family up country. The day we were due back, the nurse had stopped taking our calls. At best, when we would call the house, all we got was a confused Nana Jen, who by this point was beginning to degrade to such a point that she had no idea where the nurse was, or even if she had seen the nurse at all recently. Hurrying home, all we could find upon returning was the nurse's handbag with her phone, wallet, and keys, all missing. Nana Jen was sitting there on her bed, silently drinking tea and staring at TV static, her warm smile plastered blankly across her face. Mom and Dad would take turns looking after her while I took care of a lot of the household chores. Seeing how hard they had it with her, I didn't mind taking the lion's share of the chores. I didn't even mind the continued whispering all that much. You'd be surprised how quickly the creepy can become banal. Just part of the background noise of an ever more complex life. Lying in bed one night, I heard the door creaking open right as I was right at the precipice of sleep, forcing me awake with a jolt. I looked around to confirm my dream-fed paranoia that something beyond a nightmare had made its way in. There was nothing, even when I turned my lamp on. Nothing at all was in my room, and I could go back to sleep. I turned the lamp off and resumed my former position, comfortable once again under the sheets. An undetermined amount of time later, it happened again. A loud creak echoed into my bedroom. Turning my head to look at the doorway to my bedroom, I saw it was in the same position as it was before. Had I imagined it? A loud snoring came rumbling through the house, a comforting reminder that my parents were just feet away. Eyes open, face to the door, and meditating on the muddled roar emanating from the hall, I suddenly hear a new sound. A fast, rhythmic white noise. Breathing. Breathing coming from somewhere nearby. Then I heard it, eyes focused on the static door. I heard a creak. There was only one other place that could have been. Turning on my lamp, I returned to my original orientation facing the wardrobe. It was Jen inside the wardrobe, her flower-embossed nightgown covering much of the gap in the wardrobe door. At the top, her face, one eye poking through the crack and a familiar soft smile across her face. The most disturbing part was her fast and almost rhythmic breathing like she was excited. Afraid to break eye contact, I called out to my parents, unmoving and afraid to move, afraid to even blink. My father came in like a shot and quickly escorted a very confused woman back to her bed. It was strange, however. The moment my father entered the room, she stopped smiling and began to breathe at a regular pace. I didn't sleep well that night. I didn't have a good night's sleep for a long time. The image of her dull, sunken eyes excitedly making direct eye contact with me would singe itself into my mind any time the lights would go out. Shortly after that night, my sister would begin complaining of an awful smell. Her room being the one directly above Nana Jen, it was suspected that the smell from Jen's room rising up through the floor was the cause. It didn't matter what we did, however. No amount of potpourri or air fresheners would cover that awful smell. Even after aggressive attacks from gallons of Febreze and enough dented powers to solve any infestation, a week later the smell returned just as rancid as before. Maybe we should have been more thorough in our investigation of the smell, but my sister was leaving very soon for university, so it wasn't the highest priority after a while. Nana Jen just got worse from there. She kept staring at the ceiling in her room, just sitting there and smiling at nothing. We'd occasionally find her in places, like the attic or a storage cupboard, just looking at us as she smiled a blank artifice of her former caring expression. She grew ever gaunt and frail-looking, however. The way she moved so confidently was so disjointed from her skeletal frame. Her skin had sunk so low it was almost separate from any sort of bone structure underneath. When my great-aunt died, it caused a lot more drama in the immediate family than expected, so Mom and Dad had to go pretty much immediately. They managed to find a nurse to look after Nana Jen again after vetting this one with much more scrutiny. She even agreed to keep an eye out on me and make sure I don't burn anything down in the house while cooking or anything. Maya was nice. I know that's not a very creative description, but it fit who she was. I couldn't tell you where she was from, but she was just the right mix of both professional and understanding of the fact that I was a young teenage boy left to his own devices. She cooked kopitka a few times to make sure I had a few vegetables. I know it had potato in it and tasted great, but again, couldn't tell you the origins of the dish. "Little Kochani, what is wrong with her exactly?" Maya asked while I was sitting on the sofa watching TV one evening. "We're not sure, honestly. The doctors aren't sure either. It's kind of like a degenerative brain thing they were saying, but it's not exactly like dementia." I explained to the best of my capability. That is pretty much what your mother told me, she retorted, looking off into the distance a little. How come? Like what brought this on? I asked. She just... Maya pauses to take a deep breath. Your grandmother is saying things like wrong things. Wrong things? I parroted. Things like, about a man who lives in the room with her, a man who is angry with her. I could see the deep concern on her face. Yeah, I've heard stuff like that from her, but I guess she's just getting worse lately. I reassured her. She never does anything but stare and smile, though. I wouldn't worry. I know it's creepy, though. Maya smiled at me, attempting to show she was reassured, and messed my hair up before then returning to Nana Jen's room. It was a few days later when I heard her frantically knocking at my bedroom door. Still paranoid and vigilant at night, I woke up quickly and cautiously announced the visitor in. Maya burst into the room, panic clear in her face, barely able to get a word out. I quickly noticed her hands were covered in blood. I have to go, I saw him here. This was all I could get out of her before a figure blocked out the incoming light from the hallway. Taking both of our attention immediately, we saw Nana Jen standing just beyond the threshold of the doorway. Maya screamed a blood-curdling scream before suddenly and without any warning jumping out of my bedroom window. I sat there in shock, staring at the broken window as Jen shuffled away, restoring light to the room. A police investigation had, from what I could gather through eavesdropping, discovered that she had a history of bipolar disorder and had divorced her husband about 6 months before her suicide, just confirming the narrative they already assumed. I became obsessed. Jason had noticed the level of obsession that had taken me. He even asked about everything one day, and I broke. I cried even. I split everything, what had happened, what I was feeling, and most importantly, my theories about what was happening. On those theories, nothing was a solid hypothesis, but rather I knew something was happening, and it was Nana Jen at the root of it all. Jason and I made plans to have him stay over that weekend, something that had become rare since Nana Jen had moved in. But with my parents spending one night away for their anniversary, it was the perfect time. We were going to stay up late and sneak down and see what was happening in Jen's room at night, and what was going on with the whispering. Dude, if you scare me on purpose, I will kick you so hard in the nuts, Jason warned me in a whisper as he descended the stairs late that Saturday night. I promise you, if anything is going to scare you, it's going to be her, I replied, eyes fixed on the bottom of the stairs. Well, okay, I still don't like that I'm going first. It's your creepy ass house. With that, a resigned Jason tentatively made his way down the stairs, reacting to every creak and groan from the floorboards. As we turned the corner, we immediately heard the whispering, a soft, raspy chant emanating from the place we knew Nana Jen resided. Jason took a deep breath before quietly knocking on her door. I shot Jason a quizzically angry look, to which he just shrugged before unconfidently gripping the handle. With a nod to me, Jason opened the door. What hit us first was the stench. An expression mirroring my disgust was plastered across Jason's face as soon as the door opened. Then we saw her. Nana Jen stood in the center of the room, her clothing on the floor, and the nude skin that was so usually covered in her gown was a mass of decaying and rotting flesh. She panted as she smiled towards the ceiling once again. A dissociative free fall took hold, almost like my brain was trying to protect me by making everything feel like a dream, like it couldn't be real. I didn't even notice that Jason was screaming. I just saw her. By the time I had regained control over my senses, I noticed 2 screams in unison. One was Jason screaming in an all-encompassing terror, and the second was Jen, who was now on top of Jason, her thumbs buried deep into his eye sockets as she screamed into his face. Blustering all my strength, I kicked the thing that was Jen off of Jason, injuring my ankle as I did so with a dissatisfying crunch. Even through my pain, I still saw her thumbs leave Jason's eyes with a sickening squelch as she tumbled a meter or so away. I wrenched a whimpering Jason up and began practically dragging him out of that room and out the front door. Closing the door behind me, I continued to drag Jason away, to somewhere, to the family next door. They owned guns, and I knew we'd be safe. In tears, I pulled Jason the 400 meters or so to the next door and began banging on the door as hard as I could. Jason is alive, blind and sour about it, but alive. As for Jen, she went missing immediately after. It would be another year of sleepless nights before she was found dead and naked in the local forest by an old Celtic shrine. The worst part was what we found when she left. After investigating the ever-present smell and pulling up the floorboards in my sister's old bedroom, we found her. Jen had killed the first nurse, ripped her eyes out, pulled out her throat, then hidden her in the floors. There was plenty of shock and sorrow in the community at the news of their former matriarch, but those feelings were all temporary and soon faded with time. Now all the town is left with is the eerie tale of an old woman with no skin who haunts an old pile of stones out on the moors.